Welcome to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid. A set of conversations about our government, our politics, and the kind of country we aspire to be. And now, here's your host, Edwin Eisendrath, on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Well, here we are, my friends. It's another Saturday. It's the middle of August, the dog days of summer. And we have a lot to talk about, I'm afraid. I guess, last week I wasn't with you live. I was in Michigan. I was learning, really, listening to people in that part of the state that launched the 2020 election conspiracy stuff. Yeah, we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. And we are not helped by something called the dual state. So let me tell you about that. A man named Ernst Fraenkel was born in Germany in 1898. He grew up, a proud German. He fought for the Kaiser in World War I. He later became a prominent lawyer. He was also Jewish, which meant that he was banned from appearing in court in 1933 when the Nazis came to power. He fled the country, and in 1939, he arrived in America. 4 years later, he became a U.S. citizen. He studied American law at the University of Chicago, and he wrote about what was happening back in Germany. And his book is called The Dual State. And boy, is it relevant to us today. He explains that for most Germans, the rule of law continued as it always had. He called this the normative state. Contracts were enforced. The government protected the rights of citizens. Laws constrained prosecutors. The courts did their jobs. But the normative state had boundaries. And many Germans, particularly Jews, fell into what Fraenkel called the prerogative state. And those in the prerogative state were subject to all the power and none of the justice that a state can deliver. And look, among the insidious dangers of a dual state is that for most citizens, it's just business as usual. They don't see the cruelty. They don't experience the coercion. They think these are normal times. They say things like, oh, the pendulum swung too far in one direction, but it will swing back. It always does. And they don't notice as the prerogative state expands and their own freedom leaches away. Donald Trump and the Republicans have recreated that dual state in our country, in our time. Now, we have more and better tools to fight back than the people living in the Weimar Republic. But the dangers are very real. And for some, they're fatal. 3 stories this week, just this week in the news, prove this point. And let me start with fabulous, really great reporting by Steve Held, Dave Burns, and Raven Geary at the Unraveled Press. And these are Chicagoans. They have shown how ICE operates in this prerogative state. They managed to uncover the identity of one of the masked agents who terrorized Chicago last October. This villain's name is Martin Lagunas. Lagunas heads what is called an enforcement and removal operations team. He was at Broadview, and in Broadview, his team threw tear gas at protesters, peaceful protesters. He was in Waukegan, and he took part in that incident where ICE arrested a man and abandoned a child in a car. He went to Minneapolis during the ICE occupation there. He threatened people on the street, telling one peaceful observer, and this is a quote, "Stop following us, trust me, you're not going to like the outcome." When ICE murdered Renee Good, Lagunas posted a story about her death on Facebook and wrote FAFO. That stands for F, a word I can't say on the radio, F around and find out. It was later, it was caught on camera spraying chemical agents into car vents before breaking the windows and forcing drivers and passengers onto the ground. And this week, you may have seen the video. Lagunas stopped a car in Falls Church, Virginia, pointed a gun at the driver's head. Look, in a normative state, in a normal state, bad police officers are relieved of their duty. There's oversight. Officers like John Burge and Derek Chauvin, terrible people, right? But they had power. But subsequently, they were charged, prosecuted, convicted, and jailed. Lagunas remains on the street. Why? Why? Has he been disciplined in any way? Has he been constrained in any way? No. Why is he out there? And the answer is Donald Trump has created a space in America where the law is no more than the armed weaponization of his desires. It is his prerogative whether someone in our country gets arrested, charged, or even killed. Another story, my friend Mike Nellis, he's been on this show. He's a political consultant. For a time, one of his partners was the daughter of the judge in New York who oversaw Donald Trump's hush money trial. You remember that. Trump was convicted by a jury of 34 felonies. And that trial was an example of the normative state. But Donald Trump rejected the verdict and created space around it for his prerogative state to intervene. His henchman in the U.S. House, Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan, held hearings to discredit the judge. Those hearings went after Nellis's firm because Jordan wanted to create the impression that Trump's prosecution was political. And because Nellis wouldn't release emails with his clients, Jordan sent a letter to then Attorney General Pam Bondi referring Nellis's firm for contempt. That didn't happen, but the U.S. Attorney in Chicago, Andrew Boutros, the same guy who oversaw the corrupt manipulation of a grand jury to indict the Broadview Six, he launched an investigation into Nellis's firm. Subpoenas were issued. But you know what? There was never any indication of what crimes might have been committed because there were no crimes committed. Instead, the government engaged in another fraud, issuing broad subpoenas, not because there was a crime, but to try to find one and to create a lot of smoke to give the impression that there's a fire somewhere. The Nellis case and the fraudulent indictments of the Broadview Six make it clear that the U.S. Attorney here in Chicago is using his power, abusing the power of his office for political persecution. It is the prerogative state, the lawless abuse of power. And let's just be clear, Boutros must go. This week we learned, here's another story, that after Renee Good and Alex Preddy were murdered by ICE, the federal government opened an investigation, not into the killings, but instead targeting labor unions, environmental groups, and the Democratic Socialists of America. Oh, and an activist local political organization. They were looking for evidence that these groups supported protesters. Look, it's not illegal to protest in America. It's not illegal to support protests in America, not in the normative state. But in the prerogative one, instead of investigating the murder of Americans, the tools of government coercion target the regime's critics. Oh, there are plenty of other examples. Maybe the best this week is, of course, or last week, the effort to take away the freedom of an Olympic athlete because Donald Trump needed a fall guy for his botched reflecting pool fiasco. Imagine that. Our government was perfectly willing to take away an American's freedom for 20 years just because it was good propaganda for a corrupt administration. One man leads the effort inside the Justice Department and the FBI to create and enforce this prerogative state, and that is Todd Blanche. And every Republican, well, almost every Republican, but the Republicans in Congress just confirmed him to be our Attorney General. Disgraceful. Disgraceful. Look, and you know me, you know I am an optimist. Across our country, the growing resistance to the Trump administration gives me comfort. The way people came together here in Chicago and Minneapolis when ICE attacked confirmed that when pushed to extremes, we're not going to be divided by race. The turnout and the energy on the pro-democracy side in recent primaries prove that we will not quietly give up our national project. We are winning in court. We are winning in the streets. We are winning in public opinion. We are winning in the ballot box. But all of our efforts are predicated on the rule of law. Our efforts are legal, and they rely on a system to protect us from arbitrary power. In America, unlike in Russia, our government can't just jail us. In America, unlike in Tiananmen Square, our government cannot just shoot us. And yet, in some instances, this is exactly what it's doing. The prerogative state in America is real, but it faces here still very, very strong constraints. We still have space to push back, but it's a race. It's a race. We must win in November, and we must insist that the winners be seated in Congress. And we can't stop there because, as Frankel witnessed, no one is safe in a dual state. The executive branch in America is powerful. And so long as Donald Trump leads it, it acts to satisfy his whims rather than our laws. Until he is removed from power, American freedom, all of our freedom, is at risk. We'll talk about that and much more in a great show. Eric Michael Garcia is joining us in a moment. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. I am thrilled to be joined again, of course, by Eric Michael Garcia, who is a senior Washington correspondent for The Independent and the author of their Inside Washington newsletter. And it'd be nice for us to get a little Inside Washington right now. Welcome back, Eric.
Thanks for having me.
I guess I want to start with something that just shocks me and just get your take. And I hope most Americans are shocked. I'm thinking of the Olympic athlete that they tried to pin the blame of the reflecting pool on, and are still trying to.
Yes.
The idea that our government would be happy taking away the freedom of an American, locking him up for 20 years for no reason except that the president is unwilling to let anyone question his competence, let anyone show that he's made a mistake. That for that, they're willing to take away an American's freedom. That's just an enormous shock. It's not, the rule of law, it's tyranny. And I wonder whether members of Congress of either party really grasp what's going on, and if any of them have said no to this.
Well, right now, Congress is important. Remember, Congress is out of session right now. They're on their August recess. But I think it's very similar to the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case.
Yes.
Where they messed up court documents, they admit they messed up. And then but because the president can't back down from a fight. They can't admit to the public that they messed up, even if in court they did. I think it's incredibly revealing, and it also goes to the point that the actual that the D.C. Attorney's Office, the Office of the U.S. Attorney for District of Columbia, admitted that there was no vandalism. So I thought. It goes to the point that I always say, if you want to know what's actually going on with the Trump administration, look at the legal cases, not what they say.
Well, in both of those instances, and you're absolutely right to bring up Abrego Garcia, people's freedom was taken. Abrego Garcia was sent to CCOT, for gosh sakes. Yeah. He was shipped around the world. They brought him back and then tried him again on a trumped-up charge. Right? This is an administration that does not believe that Americans should be free, that believes that if they are embarrassed, they should put us in jail. And I don't know why Republicans who banged the table about freedom in America and around the world for generations have walked away from it so thoroughly and completely. But I don't see any indication on that side that they care about this anymore.
No, they don't. I mean, does anybody really want to be on the side of questioning the president? We've seen what happens when Republicans question the president, they lose their primaries. We saw this with Thomas Massey. We saw this with Bill Cassidy. Tom Tillis retired before he even could face a primary. So why would you if, the fate is losing your career? So.
Well, some of those reasons are the same reasons why they stood up to Pickett's charge in the Civil War, or why they landed on the beach in D-Day. You know what? They lost their lives doing it, but they were fighting for the kind of freedom that these Republicans are afraid to even raise their hand and notice. It's such a disgrace. I can't get my head around it.
Yeah. So, yeah, it does show just how the Republican Party is in complete and total fealty to the president of the United States.
Yeah. Okay. Well, related to that, after his appalling ascension to be the Attorney General of the United States, courtesy of the Republicans. Todd Blanche's first couple acts were to, let's see, give Donald Trump more immunity, and then to go out and do political campaigning,
Correct.
something that is, let's see, a violation of the Hatch Act, but the
Correct.
law doesn't apply to them.
Right, right. I mean, the difficulty with the Hatch Act is it would actually require uh, enforcing the Hatch Act, and we have kind of a double bind there, which is that the executive branch is in charge of policing itself, and unfortunately, there is no, I guess, external way to police that or to enforce it
No,
unless somebody brings it to court, and it just goes to the point that this has is that a lot of the, I guess you could say, the legal guardrails around the White House are kind of sort of on an honor system. That there's it's kind of dependent on, hey, people are actually going to play by the rules, are actually going to follow the law, and are actually going to follow the rules. But what happens when the enforcement mechanisms are not independent and they are enthralled to the president as well? So
well, there's supposed to be multiple mechanisms. One of them is Congress, but again, I have not heard a single Republican, even the ones who were reluctant to support Blanche, say anything about this. Nothing.
no, and I mean, again, it's because they're on recess. They don't want to talk about the president. They don't want to talk about what's going on, especially when the president's approval ratings are in the toilet right now. So
They may want to not want to talk about it, but there is not a papers width separation between them. And I don't think any good Democrat campaigning against them, any independent campaigning against them, is going to let them find any space. And I'm not sure they can, because then their base will turn on them.
right, exactly. I mean, even if the primaries are going to be over in like 2 weeks,
Yeah.
but even then, you still need to be able to get your voters out in November. So unless you're living in a deep red district, you kind of need those voters. So
Yeah, I think Republicans are stuck. They are stuck with Trump, and they're
yeah,
stuck with him, and they're going to go down them because for just it's worth restating this. No Democrat is going to let them pretend they didn't enable Donald Trump for the last 2 years in every single vote, and no MAGA voter is going to let them have any space between them and Trump. So they are stuck with the man.
yeah, they're kind of. I don't think that they recognize that he's not locked in with them; they're locked in there with him, so to speak. To Barbara Watchman.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right, so let's talk about some of the things that Congress actually did.
yeah.
They got a continuing resolution.
Hmm.
They couldn't pass budgets or appropriations, sorry, but
Yeah,
so they kicked the can down the road till after the midterms.
yeah.
Is this a clean CR?
This is a clean CR. Yeah, there's no poison pills or anything like that. And we should say that Congress almost never passes budgets on time under either party. The last time they did was
Mhm.
like, I think in like 1996 or something like that. So yeah, so I mean it's this is them kicking the can down the road, and it's a bipartisan American tradition. So
Yeah, all right. But the Democrats didn't get any constraints on ICE, and the Republicans
no,
got no constraints on voting.
correct. No poison pills on either side. So
Okay. Meanwhile, there's a $95 billion reconciliation
correct.
push happening. Talk about
Yes.
that.
Yeah, so the way that they're saying, the way that Republicans are saying this, the way that the House Speaker Mike Johnson was saying it before they went on recess, was they want to replenish the military stockpiles because we've used a lot of them in the war in Iran. Second of all, is they want to do some kind of relief, disaster relief, I guess maybe some farm relief. And then lastly, they want to do grant programs for the Save America Act. Now, remember, this you can't actually pass policy in a budget reconciliation. It has to be related to the budget. So they're not going to be able to do voter ID programs. They're not going to be able to do any of those because those are policy. They have nothing to do with spending. But what they can do is they can do grant programs to incentivize states to adopt these. The one reason why there's a number of reasons why I'm skeptical that this could even pass, and even if it does pass, that'll even work. For one, is that with what time do they have? They're on recess as we speak. They're campaigning. They're in their districts in their home states. And then when they come back, they're only going to be back for like 2 weeks. before before the midterm election, and then they've got 6 weeks to do budget reconciliation, to do appropriations bills, to do or kick the can again with the CR, and do and maybe do budget reconciliation all before a new Congress is sworn in, and then the clock starts back. So I always say, like, with what time? And then there's also just the fact that some Republicans, like Senator Lisa Murkowski, says she doesn't want to do a budget reconciliation as well. That a lot of people don't want to, and then they don't want to they don't want to tinker with the filibuster. So there's kind of a double bind with they don't have time, they don't have the capacity. There still is internal division within their conference, and then there's also just the fact that, look, if there's a grant program for voter IDs, let's say, a lot of the states that would take them up on that already have voter ID programs. We're talking about states like Texas. We're talking about states in the South, Republican states. So there wouldn't be a lot of, there are no pot sweeteners for, I don't know, blue states to do voter IDs.
Right, right. But there is a way to tax blue states to reward red ones, which, is
Yes, yeah.
galling for people like me. All right, so let's focus on one part, a couple parts of that. The replenishing the weapons part, which is the
Yes,
bulk of the money.
correct.
This Congress, both houses, there's a voted, it's called a concurrent resolution,
Yes,
war powers resolution against
right,
the war in Iran.
correct.
Doesn't have the force of law,
No,
right? But it's their sense that this is a bad idea, bad war, it should stop.
yes,
If they then fund $95 billion to pay for the war, it makes that former vote a fraud.
correct. Right, because again, as Speaker Johnson says, he's been saying for the last 6 months, we're not at war, right? 7 months, yeah. Wow. We're not 5 months. We're not at war right now. He says that this is a limited military operation, even though it's more fits and starts. There's hostilities and there's not hostilities. There's talk about the Strait of Hormuz is still not fully operational. So it's hard to justify, or hard to, I guess you could say, rationalize passing a $95 billion resolution to replenish the stockpiles when you said that this is not a war, and for the past 5 months they've argued that, well, we're just about done. We're just about defeating Iran. We've just about depleted their resources, and then they want to. I mean, look, sometimes you need to replenish the stockpiles. So you need to do that. But the whole argument was that this is going to be a very limited affair. This is going to be a very cheap affair, and that it would be a fairly, I guess you could say, uh, uh, non-difficult or incidental venture to degrade their military, prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, and regime change. And so far, none of that has happened. I should say the Iranian regime is still in place, and arguably more hardline than it was, 5 months ago.
And given a weapon they didn't have 5 months ago, which is control of the strait. All right, so what do people say? I mean, when you report,
Yeah.
Speaker Johnson says, okay, so he says, but is there anybody on the other side of that saying, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, the government sent an Article 51 letter to the United Nations explaining why we were at war with Iran. So you square that with your lie that we're not at war? Who is calling him out on his lies?
I mean, I think that Senator Tim Kaine is the big person on the Democratic side,
Mhm.
and he was the same with Barack Obama when Barack Obama would be arming
Yep.
the Houthis. So credit to him, he does it with both sides, with
Yep.
his own side. I think that you're also seeing a few other people like Senator Jack Reed are also talking about that, the top Democrat on the Armed Services Committee. Thomas Massey's still gonna Thomas Massey. We got him for a few more months left, so God bless that crazy man. He's out of his mind, but he has principles, which is more than I can say for most people.
Yeah.
But he's obviously promoting these war powers resolutions. So there's a number of people who are pushing them. Senator Rand Paul, also a Republican from Kentucky, a Libertarian
Mhm.
Republican from Kentucky. So there are people. The difficulty is that there haven't been enough Republicans to say, to get this over the finish line, to get like they'll sometimes vote on the motion to proceed, and then they'll flip on the
Walk
actual
away.
vote. They'll,
Yeah.
they'll flip on the actual vote. There's the motion to proceed on legislation, and then there's the actual hard vote. And then even then, the president can still veto it. And again, we should add that war powers resolutions are not a formal declaration of war. They were, as you know, I mean, I'm not old enough to remember this because it was before I was born, but they were basically a way for Congress to express a strongly worded letter, so to speak, that we're dissatisfied with this, and could you and have some kind of guardrails, even though that not really that many, but even then it shows that even the tiniest bit of a guardrail is not acceptable, or not something that the White House that the Republican Congress wants to put in place on the White House.
Yeah. So I am old enough to remember because it was, Nixon's presidency. And one of the things that Congress did back then is interesting. Nixon started to bomb Cambodia.
Correct.
Cambodia was a peaceful country. It was not involved in the war. We were
Yes.
at war in Vietnam. He started to bomb Cambodia. But parenthetically, that led to the destabilization of that society, Pol
Yes.
Pot, and an incredible slaughter of human beings.
Correct.
It was a war crime. But Congress stopped it. How
Correct.
did they stop it? Not with a war powers resolution. They didn't have it at the time. They simply cut the funding.
Correct.
They said you cannot use the money for this. So
Correct.
Congress has power if it's willing to use it, but they're
Yes.
willing to abuse it, this crowd.
Correct, correct. And we should add that Nixon had a Democratic controlled Congress at the time, so they were much more willing to cut out the funding at the time.
Yeah. Well, it was a less partisan time.
Yeah, it was a much less partisan.
Yeah.
There were critics of the Vietnam War within the Republican Party at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's change the subject a little bit. I want you to explain to folks what FinCEN is and why the change to the beneficial ownership rules of companies is a story. Is that something you followed?
Not as much, but it does show that like there is this kind of ability. I'm assuming you're talking about the World Liberty Financial thing, or
I'm talking about, they said companies no longer have to say who owns them.
basically, yes.
Right.
And that is incredible. That's an incredible removal of transparency. My first job was covering financial regulation, so I
Right,
always
it's a gift to money launderers.
right, exactly. It's a huge gift to money launderers. It's a huge gift. It allows people, it's a way for, it's really bad for shareholders to know what's going on with their company. It's a really bad way for anybody who has investments in any particular company to not know what they're investing in. It really is a giveaway to companies, money launderers, anybody who to not know what's going on with their money. So
Yeah, crazy. Absolutely crazy. All right, so when Congress is on vacation,
yes.
what occupies your days?
Oh boy, I do kind of get stir crazy a little bit here, but I am trying to get back on. I'm trying to get out on the campaign trail. I'm trying to go to Texas. I'm trying to go to Georgia.
Okay.
But I mean we've got a lot of primary elections that are going on right now. I was very closely watching what was going on in your neighboring state of Wisconsin with the governor's race. That was something to watch. I've definitely been watching the South Carolina Republican Senate primary, where Lindsey Graham's sister won the runoff. Is going to make it to the runoff, I should say. So there still are some things, but the president keeps things a little. He's never off, so to speak.
Well, so yesterday, he told America, he told the world that pretty soon the United States is going to claim the Strait of Hormuz as a
Correct.
territory. Now, I guess we're not at war, but we're going to take a chunk of another country, as I guess we're going to do with Greenland, and make it part of the United States. Is he drunk? Is he sick? Well, like what is the? In what world does a president say things like that?
Again, it goes to the point that I think that they got overconfident with the enter Venezuela with Maduro, with how I guess relatively smoothly it went, that they were just able to take Maduro and extradite him to the United States. But taking an international body of water is very different from extraditing someone and sending it to New York City. It's very different from I don't know how that would work out. Let's take into account that most of the oil that the United States gets is not from the Strait of Hormuz. We produce spoiler, we produce a lot of oil here, but we
More
just
than
consume,
anybody, right?
we just consume more than we produce. But we also get a lot of oil from Canada, elsewhere. But it's like this is oil that goes to Japan, that goes to South Korea, that goes to a lot of our international allies. What legitimate claim do we have to the waters in the Strait of Hormuz when we're the ones who began the bombing of the Strait of Hormuz? So, this is like geopolitics 101. What happens if you bomb Iran? They close the Strait of Hormuz. So,
I mean, even if we have no legitimate claim, it's utterly illegal nonsense. But we also do not have the military capacity
we
apparently
don't.
to take it, right?
We
Because it's narrow waterway, and you got one country on one side and another country on another side, and we're a couple thousand miles away. Now, maybe you could station ships there forever. I mean, I can't imagine
I
the
guess
size
so.
of the operation it would take to occupy hundreds of miles of Iran forever.
Right, right. It would be virtually impossible. It would require a lot. It would require way more ships than we had the capacity to. We would have to be moving a lot of ships from the Pacific, from elsewhere, to relocate there. So it's not logistically possible to do something like that. I
Right.
guess I guess it's Trump just thinks it's as easy as calling the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, but we don't. That's not how it works. So
So while we're on the topic of our commander in chief who doesn't know how it works, he has said we need to redesign the Ford class aircraft carriers to move the tower, and we have to redesign all our aircraft carriers to put back in steam
yeah.
catapults rather than the electromagnetic ones that we use. Like, uh, and he's going to order them to do these billion-dollar changes that make us less strong.
Yeah, again, I guess it just goes to him being very nostalgic for the olden days, but without any logical explanation. I mean, you could say the same thing about the Warthog jets. So,
Well, next thing you know, we'll have bayonets.
yeah, I know. Horses and bayonets. So, yeah, these aren't going to be more secure. I think that Trump just likes the way that they look, but okay, sure, why
Okay.
not?
Well, I can think of a lot of reasons why not, including that lives are at stake.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so Carolyn Levitt,
Yes.
talk about like what's that? Did she just leave because she had another kid, or is she fed up?
Yeah,
What's the
that's a
scuttlebutt, and who's taking her place?
So my coworker, my colleague Andrew Feinberg, my White House reporter Andrew Feinberg, I'm sure you saw the story, that she announced that she was leaving, and so abruptly that they didn't have a replacement. Now, look, she has two kids under the age of 3. Being a working mom is tough, you know. My mom had me around the same age that Carol Levitt is, so like
Yeah, it's tough.
let's have some grace. But I think it does show that that there isn't a lot of coordination right now in the administration, and then also as people just to be completely fair and to be completely honest, that that White House press secretaries are kind of the political whipping boys. They go through presidents tend to go through press secretaries pretty quickly. I think Bush had 4. Uh, Obama had like 3. Joe Biden had 2. So it's not like so it is a very very difficult job. It has a finite shelf life. Your job is to take all the javelins that are meant for the president and catch them from the press and take them. But I think it does show that this is an administration where a lot of people are getting ready to exit, or there's an expectation that Democrats are going to take back the House and the Senate, House and maybe the Senate. That's still up in the air. So it's time for a little bit of a readjustment. So.
Um, you said the job of the president's press secretary is to take incoming flack from the press, but that's actually not the job. The
Yeah,
job is to try within the bounds of to get press questions, because press is
yes,
legitimate in America, to get their questions answered so
right,
they can do their job.
right.
And I don't believe that's the job Carolyn Levitt did. I believe
No,
she, right? So I don't know why we have a presidential press secretary. I don't know when we have presidential press conferences. And I'm guessing that the best reporting you've done in Washington had nothing to do with anything you learned in a presidential brief ever.
A former mentor of mine, who was a former Washington bureau chief at the AP, told me that that it's that like the best report, that like the press briefings are for suckers. Um, you got, there's a lot of performance there. There's the semblance of reporting there, but really, it's a very choreographed kind of dance, so to speak, which is like, everybody's at their desk. That there's a little bell that says like, okay, time for the press briefing. Everybody goes in their seats. There's assigned seating. People do the question. The press secretary does the open. Everybody's questioning that. That's kind of why I don't like going to the White House. And I should say, I didn't like going to the White House under Biden either. It's just not my bag. I prefer the Capitol. I prefer there's a little bit more freedom of movement. But yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, the White House, I think, again, this might be a little controversial, might be surprising to some people. I actually don't think we should televise the briefings at all. I think that
I agree with you.
I think it incentivizes both the press and the administration to perform rather than to inform. So if it were up to me, I would send the interns at the news outlets and let the reporters report. So
yeah. I mean, I guess it's the same way in the Pentagon.
Yeah, exactly.
Worse.
Well, yeah. Well, even at the Pentagon, they're used. Now they've severely restricted the movement of people at the Pentagon, where there used to be a very vibrant, lively Pentagon press corps that has now been significantly curtailed under Secretary Hegseth.
All right. Well, what did you make of the Fauci show?
Dr. Fauci and all that. I think that what it really is Rand Paul has always kind of had a bug to pick with Dr. Fauci. Look, were there some mistakes made in COVID? Yes, of course there were. But it was a once in a lifetime novel virus. So a lot of it was guesswork. A lot of this was going back and forth and kind of figuring out what was the right thing to do. But a lot of it really just goes back to this is kind of multiple people said this, so I'm not saying anything new, but a lot of this is just revenge for the way that Trump feels that the quote unquote the deep state wronged him, and this feeling that COVID might have cost Trump the election, when in fact what I've said before, and I've said this multiple times, if Trump had just worn a mask and he had told people we're sending everybody a mask during COVID, and they had done another round of stimulus, Trump probably wins re-election with 400 electoral votes.
If he'd done his job,
if he didn't
do the job,
yeah, exactly. So if a pig had wings, it'd be a unicorn. So
yep. I am interested in the midterms. I think enormous amount is riding on the midterms.
Absolutely.
But you're in Washington, and so you're forgiven for the sin of focusing on the next presidential election already.
No, I'm a sicko. I love midterms. So,
but you wrote about the presidential race a little bit. So let's spend a few minutes and talk about what that city is thinking about the presidential race.
Sure. I mean, let's talk about the obvious one first, and let's talk about the more variable ones. So I think it's pretty obvious on the Republican side, it's going to be J.D. Vance versus Marco Rubio. I think everybody within Trump world and outside of Trump world acknowledges that that's going to be the Republican primary. Maybe some other people.
How do they decide that? In primaries, or does Trump build another cage on the White House and have them just duke it out and he goes thumbs up, thumbs down?
I'd actually prefer that. I think that'd actually be hilarious.
They're vying for his vote because that's the one that's going to matter.
I actually think that would be. I would actually pay a subscription to watch that. That would be fantastic. Get JD and Marco in the gym, get them work out a little bit, and then 6 months later duke it out. But so there's that. But I think the Democratic side is more interesting to me for now because look, Democrats are 2 for 3 against Trump, or 1 for 3 against Trump. They lost 2 for 3. And I think that they really are trying to figure out what comes next. Now, I think that and what they want to be and what's the message they want to send to the American people that they want to give to people post-Trump. So first and foremost, of course, there's going to be a new primary calendar. It's, let me see if I can remember right. It's going to be South Carolina, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Mexico, New Mexico, Michigan, and Virginia. Those are the 6 primary states. I think that it's pretty obvious that for now, whether she runs or not, Kamala Harris is the front runner. If you look at polling, if you look at public approval ratings, she's the front runner. But then it gets a little dicey because remember, Kamala Harris has never won a competitive primary for president. She dropped out before Iowa, if you remember, in 2019.
Mhm.
Then it comes down to who the other ones are and what their lanes are. I think the big question everybody's asking right now is whether Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is going to run for president or whether she's going to decide to run for Senate. I think she raised a lot of eyebrows when she announced she was freezing her eggs. I was actually on Polish radio earlier this week, and they were talking about that. So I think that there's a real legitimate question, especially given how many socialists and progressives are winning in primaries, whether she could mount a challenge. Then there's the other ones. There's your Pete Buttigieg's, your Andy Bashir's. Can they muster up enough name recognition and name ID and get enough people to vote for them? Otherwise, that couldn't. Could they get which coalitions would back them? I think it's pretty obvious for now that not because she is an African American woman, but because she's the establishment favorite, the most recent nominee, that Kamala Harris will do very well with Black voters of the South. But other than that, we don't know. But then, a candidate like AOC could probably do really well in states like New Mexico and Nevada because of the Hispanic support there. But also, those are states with heavy organized labor. Michigan is another example of a state with organized labor. So I think that the new calendar is going to scramble a lot of ways that presidential candidates will otherwise campaign.
Yeah, I mean, I like the new calendar. Among the reasons I like the new calendar is that it allows the diversity of the Democratic coalition
Yes.
to pick its leaders, where the old ones really didn't.
Yeah, right. I mean, prior to that, it was Iowa, which is
Iowa, New Hampshire,
very white.
right?
New Hampshire, which is whiter. Then you have Nevada, which has a lot of Latinos. It has like 30% Latino population, 20% Black population. So it's diverse.
Mhm.
And then you've got you had South Carolina. And now this one, it's like it starts with the base of the Democratic Party, older Black voters in South Carolina. Then you've got states like Nevada, like I said, a lot of Latino voters. New Mexico, which its state constitution is also in Spanish and English. And then you have a state like Michigan, which I think is very representative of the country, though I think Illinois is more representative of the country because you have Black voters, Hispanic voters, Asian American voters, Muslim voters, your old white working class voters, your guys who work for the UAW, so you got that, and then you've got Virginia, so
Yeah.
which also people forget. People think of Virginia as very white. It has a large Black population. It has a very large Hispanic population. It has a growing Asian American population.
Well, but Virginia is an enormous amount of Virginia is suburban Washington voters.
Yes, very
Yeah.
much so. Yes.
I mean, just in terms of population. Yeah, I mean, Michigan certainly had an interesting primary season.
It very much did, yes. Between Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens. Now, I think that we've seen the polling. There was an internal poll that came out today from Senate Majority PAC showing Abdul El-Sayed up by 3 against Mike Rogers, but then there was a Fox News poll earlier this, I think, like 2-3 days ago, showing Mike Rogers beating Abdul El-Sayed. That one's going to be a very interesting one to watch. I'm going to be watching that one.
I just spent a few days in the state, and I went up. I wanted to talk to people in Antrim County.
Okay.
Antrim County is where the fake election thing in 2020 got started.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And I think Abdullah said has a lot of work to do.
He does.
It's a really important thing that Democrats are going to have to look in the mirror and be honest with each other about, that the progressive movement, the DSA movement, is largely college educated white folks, largely. And it hasn't resonated with Black or white working class voters.
Right.
Right. And so Syed's work has nothing to do with Israel-Palestine, which is like what all the press is about. It has everything to do with saying to Black voters in Detroit, I know this movement that I'm part of stood on the sidelines and didn't vote for Kamala Harris,
Right.
but that's then. This is now. It's a different era, and I really do understand the challenges you're facing, and I really will represent you in the United States Senate. And but that is he's got to sell that, and he's got to mean it. He's got to listen to people. So the future of the Democrats in Michigan depends on black voters in Detroit.
It absolutely depends on black voters in Detroit. Look, he's going to get young people out in Washtenaw County, which is where Ann Arbor is, and
Yeah.
Ingham County, which is where East Lansing is, and Traverse City.
Yep,
But
yep.
it's gonna depend. He's going to have to spend a lot of time in black churches, in Detroit and in Wayne County. Now he did better, I think, than expected in Wayne County, but still Haley Stevens overwhelmingly won Wayne County, which is right where Detroit is. So it's gonna be the most important thing to convince black voters that he's on their side, that he's going to look out for their interests. I think it's one of the most interesting stats I think that a lot of people have that I've looked at for the past few months since May is the increase in black voter turnout in primaries ever since the Calais decision.
Yeah.
If you look at black voter turnout in Alabama and in Georgia and in Mississippi, it has been astronomical since the
Right.
Supreme Court.
I mean,
Right.
black voters for most of American history, black Americans have been the champion of voting rights, have
Correct.
fought for it harder than anybody, and are not going to let it go. I mean, it's a fabulous thing.
Right. I mean, I remember I was in Atlanta in 2024. I was out in Stone Mountain, Georgia, and there was this old black lady. I was talking with her about early voting, and she says, "Look, my family died and bled for this, And I was just
Yep.
like, and I realized, oh yeah, I'm in Atlanta. This is where Dr. King is. This is where John Lewis is. Like, of course.
Yep.
And yeah, this is.
It's not lost on voters in Detroit.
It's not lost voters on Detroit. Remember, there were race riots. There were riots after Dr. King's murder in Detroit. In Detroit as well. There was that great movie Detroit a few years, like about a decade ago. So there was civil unrest. There was police violence in Detroit as well. So it wasn't just in the South where
Nope.
black voters
Absolutely.
faced. Look, I was born in Chicago. I know about the history with Chicago as well, and police violence and police brutality there. But yeah. So I think that this is going to be that black voters very much can and should flex their muscle. They should recognize and I think that Dr. El Sayed has to convince them that he is going to be the voice on voting rights in the
Yep.
United States Senate.
Yep.
He's going to be the voice on black maternal health when he goes to Washington. He's going to be the voice on criminal justice reform.
Yes,
safe
and
communities.
saying to Harmeet Dillon, what you've done to the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department is a crime. Yeah.
Correct. Yes, it is going to be convincing black voters that he will be their best advocate, even if he's a Arab American Muslim man named Dr. Abdul El Sayed, and that's not to say that black voters don't know. There's a lot of black Muslims, but it's going to be, but it is going to be saying, yes, we do, like, I'm not as steeped in this community as you would like, but I'm going to be your biggest champion when I come to Washington, and Mike Rogers isn't.
So, and on the contrary, Mike Rogers' path is, I think, more difficult because what I found in talking to those Trumpers up in Antrim County was they've soured on the man. They still hate us, by the way. They still are not going to vote for in a million years. They are not going to vote for Dr. El Sayed, but they might stay home.
Right, because they see Mike. A, he lost in a year that Trump won Michigan. B, there's also just the fact that they don't. Rogers is still very much a pre-Trump GOP Republican. Now, look, he now has the Mar-a-Lago tan from living in Florida a little bit. He now, posts AI photos.
It feel less legit because people remember him, and then they say, "Wait a minute, which guy is this?" This is an era where authenticity matters, and if you're just going to be Trump's agent, it's just going to be harder.
Right. I mean, as a friend of mine likes to say, Trump is simultaneously the most dishonest and the most honest president we've ever had. And like initially, I didn't get what he's saying. That I was like, oh yeah, Trump. Look, Trump is doing a lot of the things that he said he was going to do in 2024. But then he'll just lie about a lot of other stuff. But
Nixon said famously, "I am not a crook." But
Right.
if he had said, but the lesson in retrospect is if he'd said, I am a crook and be proud of it, he might have gotten away with it.
You might have, you might have. So, but the point is that it looks very when Mike Rogers kind of wears the MAGA suit, it's very ill-fitting, so to speak. Like it doesn't, the hems aren't working, so to speak. So I like what I would say is that I think that he has to convince, he simultaneously, he's now doing this thing where he says, look, Democrats, if you want to make the jump over here, it's more, the water's warm. But at the same time, doing that means you have to make a few concessions. And are those concessions enough to are those concessions going to be too much for MAGA to say, well, this guy's a rhino, this guy's not going to stand
Have
with
you
president?
ever seen a concession that MAGA likes?
No, I have not seen a concession that MAGA likes. No, that's the whole point of MAGA.
Yeah.
Fight, fight, fight. Never back down. Never apologize.
No.
Concession. Like I think if I went to Wrigley Field, they wouldn't even buy concessions. So
Right. That's exactly right. Now, this is the party that thinks testosterone shots are a military policy.
Right, exactly. So that, but that it's somehow, evil to give them to trans people. But the thing that I would say is that there really is that Rogers has his, both of them are going to have trouble with their own base and convincing people. But I think that the main question that El Sayed has to be getting on his knees and praying for is that Michigan is one of the few states that still has straight ticket voting. So he's just got to hope that a good chunk of Michiganders just say, you know what, I got a busy day, straight ticket, put in the box
Yeah.
and go on about their.
Black voters have more experience
Yes.
than Assad's base does.
Correct. Yes.
And they're not, I think they are fully aware of the stakes right now.
Yes.
And
yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the other thing to take into account is that, and this isn't to knock DSA or anything like that, Detroit is, Michigan isn't New York City. New York City, you can basically walk blocks. You could get your DSA friends to go walk blocks with a clipboard and everything like that. Detroit, I mean, Michigan is very spread out. It's not just Detroit.
Right.
So it's very difficult to, you got to get in a car or you got to drive tons of miles, log in tons of miles. It's not going to be what campaigning for Zohran Mamdani was, or campaigning for your local DSA candidate was. You actually have to get in the car, talk to people. It's not going to be as easy. So,
yeah, all of these things are playing out. They play out in one way in Manhattan. God
Yes.
bless Manhattan. But they're playing out for the whole country in this part of the country I love, the Great Lakes region, in
Right.
Michigan, in Wisconsin, in very interesting ways that are going to determine what political party the Democrats are coming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. I think right now the Democratic Party is still going through an identity crisis. So, as every party does after they lose, the Republican Party became significantly more conservative when they were out of the White House last time, and in the past, Democrats toggled a little bit to the middle when they were out of the White House during Reagan's presidency. They became a little more progressive when Democrats when they were when Bush was in the White House. So right now they need to figure out what they want to do. But I mean, one of the things that I just noticed with people, when I talk with people, wherever I go, whether they're Republican, Democrat, whatever, is people are still kind of just tired. The most informative discussion I had that made me think that Democrats were in trouble was I was in Milwaukee during the 24 and 24 DNC, and I was a bar with a few African American voters, and they were like, "Look, this beer cost me $7," and I was like, "Okay, if somebody from Wisconsin's complaining about the cost of beer, there's a problem."
Yeah.
And then also they were just like, rent is high as hell, but they're also just like, I just don't trust Trump. Like, I think a lot of people right now, whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a Republican, whether you're neither, people are just kind of tired, and they just want kind of just like, can we get some stability and some feel and security more than anything else?
We need it. That's got to be our last word, because I've just looked and we have run past time.
Oh my God.
I can't believe it. I love talking to you. The time flies by. Let's do it again. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye, everybody. Okay, just before we go to break, you can find his work at The Independent, Eric Michael Garcia. It's terrific reporting. We'll come back after the news.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. Brian Finucane is back. He is a senior advisor in the U.S. program of the International Crisis Group, an editor at Just Security, a non-resident senior fellow at the Reese Center on Law and Security. That's at NYU, NYU Law. We last talked in April, in the war's first month, and both a lot and nothing has changed. Brian, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, I want to ask you about my own take on this administration as a way of framing. I have come to see this administration as trapped by its own reliance on coercion as its first, second, and third strategy for just about everything. And that's from intimidation and physical coercion, that leaves no space for talent for negotiating or when parties have real differences. And, I see that whether it's ICE here at home or the bombing of fishermen in the Pacific Caribbean or going to a war in Iran. And I wonder if this coercion first, a notion of how they think, seems right to you.
I think it does. I think there's another through line, which I want to get back to in a moment, which is the president's personal love of spectacle and using the U.S. military in particular, or men in uniform more generally for spectacle. But yes, the toolkit that this administration has been trying to use on Iran specifically, they consisted of coercive instruments, airstrikes, threats of war crimes, and even threats of genocide. If you recall the obliteration threat back in the spring. And then economic coercion. And that is where they've settled for the moment. The current approach of the administration, at least for this week or so, is one of economic coercion, what you might call maximum pressure of sanctions on Iran and the reimposition and continuation of the blockade on Iran.
Yeah. The legal basis for this war has always been weak, and the aims of the war have never been clear. So okay, we're at war, but we don't know why, and it's probably not legal. It's not a really good place to be. I want to ask you about one thing, because you educated me when we talked in April about something called Article 51 letters, right? The among other things, we had to notify the UN. And I just want to ask, since Donald Trump has claimed to get around the war powers law, that this isn't the same war, it's a second war. Did they issue a second letter to the UN?
No, there's been no follow-up Article 51 letter.
Yeah.
So for your audience, Article 51 of the UN Charter recognizes and preserves the inherent right of individual and collective self-defense under international law, but it imposes a procedural requirement that when states take such measures in self-defense, they have to report it to the Security Council, and those reports are referred to colloquially as Article 51 letters. The U.S. did submit one relatively early on in the conflict, laying out its arguments for using military force. As I wrote in Just Security shortly after the fact, those arguments were completely unconvincing. The arguments have not aged well, and they are no more convincing now than they were at the time. The administration, its arguments both as a matter of international law and domestic law for waging this war are completely unavailing.
And I think they're saying it's a second war in order to get around the War Powers Act, but they aren't really saying it, right?
They made that argument. So the War Powers Resolution, which your audience may be familiar with, imposes a 60-day time limit on any military hostilities that the president engages in without congressional authorization. Obviously, this administration never received congressional authorization for this war, and so the 60-day clock ran out back in the spring. At the time, the administration made the argument that, well, we're in the ceasefire now, and so the 60-day clock is stopped, and so we're not in breach of the War Powers Resolution. Their sort of implicit argument after that was that, when the resumption of hostilities constituted some new conflict, and so the War Powers Resolution's 60-day clock starts afresh.
Right, which is nonsense. If they believed it, they would have filed another Article 51 thing with the UN. So clearly, I just want to understand that this war isn't just illegal, but lawless. That the laws around the war are being ignored, and they're just saying, You can't stop me. No one can stop us. Congress has voted twice that they don't like this war. I mean, both houses. Granted, it's concurrent resolution, so it's not a law. But courts can't, UN can't. They're just saying we do whatever we want. And so illegal is one thing, but saying the laws don't apply we're in new territory, I think.
Yes, that is the general attitude of this administration. This war has been waged in violation of the UN Charter, in violation of the U.S. Constitution, in violation of the War Powers Resolution, and in defiance of Congress's own express will. Back in June, as you mentioned, both houses of Congress voted for a concurrent resolution demanding a termination and end of these hostilities, and the administration completely disregarded it. So yes, I think it is fair to characterize the administration's actions here as lawless.
Now, Republicans in Congress are undermining that vote because they're pushing a reconciliation bill that provides 90-some billion dollars more, particularly for this effort. It's confusing what they believe. Can you still hear me?
I can. Is that on my end?
I hear you perfectly. Brian, I hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I had a interruption there. Excuse me.
Sorry. I just like when Congress says we're going to vote that we do not approve this war, but here's another $90 billion for it. That can be confusing.
Yes. So there are a few different things going on here. One is we have this continuing resolution that was voted on. Okay, that could have provided an opportunity for Congress to impose a funding cutoff for the hostilities. In 1973, that is how Congress ultimately brought in Nixon's unauthorized bombing of Cambodia. They almost forced the government shutdown and ultimately reached a compromise with Nixon where they would give him another week or two and then the funding would be cut off for bombing of Cambodia.
Right.
In addition, there has been this request by the administration for a supplemental specifically for Iran, okay, to replenish U.S. arms and to continue operations for Iran. Under the executive branch legal doctrine, if there were a specific appropriation for the Iran war to continue hostilities there, that would constitute ratification or de facto authorization for continuing the war. That's the executive branch's arguments they relied on back in '99 for the Kosovo War, for example. But another way to look at this is another opportunity for Congress to impose guardrails or impose a cutoff, right? And so if there is any effort in Congress to move this supplemental appropriation, opponents of the war should use this opportunity to try to turn the war off altogether.
Well, let's talk about that. You wrote a fabulous piece about how Congress can recover its rightful role as the body that makes these decisions about whether to go to war. And you said they have several strategies that can be deployed. Talk about those. Well,
so in the first instance, we've seen Congress deploy tools as disposal. These are the repeated votes that have been forced, particularly in the Senate, on war powers resolutions, which would require the president to end hostilities with Iran. Okay, those have a number of those have some of those have passed. We've had this concurrent resolution that passed, but nonetheless, the president continues the hostility, continues the naval blockade in defiance of Congress's will. Congress also has what some of us refer to as the ultimate war power, which is the power of the purse. As mentioned a moment ago, that is ultimately how Congress got the Nixon administration to stop bombing Cambodia, that imposed a funding cutoff. And so that is a potential tool at Congress's disposal. It can be included in a supplemental appropriation or other appropriate legislative vehicle. Short of that, if Congress is able to rouse itself, it can be conducting aggressive oversight of this war. How it's being waged, why it was launched in the first place, the administration's, how the administration proposes to bring it to a close. We've seen little interest at all on the part of the majorities in either the House Foreign Affairs or Senate Foreign Relations Committees or the Defense Committees in either house to conduct such oversight. But the minorities could conduct shadow hearings, engage in oversight, or prepare to be conducting such oversight in the next Congress should Democrats capture one or both houses. And then ultimately, I think Congress needs to be thinking about how it prevents the next such conflict, right? In addition to ending this conflict, how do you impose guardrails to prevent this president or a future president from engaging in a similar military misadventure on a whim? And that's going to require a structural reform to the 1973 War Powers Resolution.
I want to talk about that because there's some bills in that would do that, and I want to get your view on that. But since you mentioned Cambodia twice, I just want everybody listening to recall that Richard Nixon engaged in an illegal bombing campaign in a country that wasn't Vietnam, where we were at war. And that one of the results that many people believe one of the results was the destabilization of that country and the incredible slaughter that happened under Pol Pot afterwards. So the consequences of a rogue government going to war without the thinking that goes into the deliberation about its consequences, that goes into having this conversation in public and through Congress, can have devastating results in the world. We are already seeing that, certainly economically, in the world with this war, but we don't know whether it'll expand. We just don't know. We don't know too much about what's going on right now in that part of the world. And that is what happens when you go to war without any consultation with anyone.
Right. I mean, the U.S. Constitution made going to war hard for very good reasons, right? They did not leave the decision to take the country to war to the whims of one man. Okay, they required the debate and deliberation by the legislative branch, right? And this was designed to make process going to war difficult because it's one of the most monumental decisions that a country can make. This expenditure of blood and treasure.
Yeah, well, and at least the studying, at least the deliberation about the consequences, which these guys do not seem to care about what they break. Okay, so that's an aside. Let's get back to the potential ways that Congress, that not this Congress, because they won't do anything, but some future Congress might strengthen the War Powers Act.
Right. And so there's been legislation introduced in the last few years in both houses of Congress, and it was bipartisan at the time. But this is back in 2021. Congressman McGovern, and then Congressman Peter Meyer, and then McGovern, and then Nancy Mace introduced legislation in the House. And then there was also companion legislation in the Senate introduced by Chris Murphy, Bernie Sanders, and Mike Lee. And the legislation, in both houses, would overhaul the 1973 War Powers Resolution to close loopholes in that law by defining some key terms, and impose real guardrails, give that law real teeth by creating automatic funding with prohibitions on certain categories of unilateral action by the White House, as well as funding cutoffs. And so for any sort of unilateral offensive operation the White House might want to undertake, there'd be a blanket funding prohibition. If the president wanted to take an offensive operation, he would have to come to Congress and get authorization beforehand. Now, there was a carve out to preserve the president's constitutional authority to repel a sudden attack. As Commander-in-Chief, the president has authority to repel a sudden attack upon the country.
Sure.
The obligation is recognized by the Supreme Court in the prize cases. But also, there even for such, the president has an authority to repel a sudden attack, but that is not equal authority to wage an open-ended war. So even for such supposedly defensive operations, there would be a cutoff and policed by funding restrictions. And then there would be mechanisms for expedited votes on a congressional authorization use force. And in the House version, there would also be mechanisms to try to get the courts to actually weigh in and police disputes between the legislature and the executive on the exercise.
That's interesting. They have certainly been reluctant to do that.
Absolutely. So this legislation has been formed by the last 50 years or so of the War Powers Resolution and its shortcomings. And I think it's fair to say that those of us who are working in this space are also interested in making sure that any new legislation is informed by the way that Trump 2.0 has wielded unilateral war powers.
So I'm trying to imagine what dispute we would ask the courts to step in on in this case. But I guess it's pretty obvious because the administration has said this is a defensive war.
Right.
They've characterized against all common sense and against any reason this war as, oh, we were under imminent threat, which we weren't.
So one of the common disputes between Congress and the White House with respect to the current war powers resolution, and one that members of Congress in the past have tried to get courts to weigh in on, is whether U.S. forces were ever introduced into, quote, hostilities in the first place. And that's significant because that's what starts
the clock.
The clock for removing them, okay? And unsurprisingly, the executive branch has adopted a very narrow definition of hostilities to maximize the freedom of action, one that's at odds with Congress's original intent. And so one of the ideas here is that by both defining the term hostilities and introduction of hostilities in this new law, and to provide for mechanisms for expedited judicial review, it will strengthen Congress's hand, okay, if it decides to go to the courts.
Provided we have a Congress that works.
Right. Yes. There are aspects of this legislation that would operate automatically, like the funding cutoffs.
Right.
But there are others that would, of course, we rely on Congress actually discharging its constitutional responsibilities in this space.
Yeah. Well, but we've had Congresses that have in the past, and hopefully we will again in the future. Brian, we've spent 15 minutes or so talking about war and how we can control war. It turns out that there are other tools in the tool chest when there are international disputes. What are the ways that you can address international disputes other than going to war? It seemed like we've forgotten that there are any.
Well, I think Iran is instructive because we've seen very clearly a demonstration that there are alternatives to going to war with Iran to address its nuclear program. And that, of course, was the Obama administration's nuclear deal with Iran, what's referred to as the JCPOA, that involved extended multilateral negotiations involving not just the U.S. and Iran, but other states, and involved dozens or hundreds of U.S. government experts and diplomats. So the brightest people in the U.S. government, top scientific experts, working to craft a deal that would constrain Iran's nuclear program and provide for inspections and transparency so that the United States and other countries could keep tabs on what the Iranians were up to. Okay, so I think it's important to bear in mind that we have, under a functioning administration, we have diplomatic tools. We have this deep reservoir of expertise available to the president if he so chooses to use it, and those provide alternatives to dropping bombs.
Right, and one of the reasons diplomacy can be successful is there is the implicit threat that if they don't, you can do something. The word they love these days is kinetic, right? You can hit somebody, but that threat now from the United States doesn't mean what it used to. Now that Iran has seen it and survived it, yes.
Yes, so I think it's also important to note that international law, the UN Charter, prohibits not just the use of force, dropping bombs, but also the threat of the use of force. There's other forms of coercion, economic coercion, and one of the successful approaches of the JCPOA was a combination of carrots and sticks, right? You have sanctions, and then you have sanctions relief. And so, unfortunately, this administration is not very good at wielding the combinations of carrots and sticks. And it's worth recalling that both in 2025 and then again 2026, the U.S. resorted to bombing Iran in the midst of negotiations with the Iranians, right? And so the Iranians are fairly skeptical of diplomacy with the United States at this moment. And one of the things that's going on right now is that Iran is seeking to maintain and retain the leverage it acquired during this conflict through its control over traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. And one of the reasons it's seeking to do so is Iran itself wants to restore deterrence vis-a-vis the United States. It does not want another round of war. It does not want to engage in more diplomacy that just leads to more bombing. It wants to head off another surprise attack by the United States or Israel against it.
By controlling the flow of the Strait. That's the best method. Yeah.
Yeah. So the two principal means to restoring deterrence from Tehran's perspective are controlling the strait, and also the threat of strikes on regional energy infrastructure in the Gulf.
Yeah. You took some time to talk about the size of the negotiating team that did JCPOA, the talent that was required, the expertise that need to be brought to bear, the inclusivity of multiple international partners. That doesn't, when we go negotiate, when this administration negotiates, it sends the president's son-in-law and another real estate guy. If you're on the receiving end of that after you've been through the first round, is it possible to take it seriously?
Well, it becomes increasingly difficult again after repeated rounds of the U.S. bombing you during the midst of
while you're negotiating.
Yeah. And there is reporting that suggests that the U.S.-Iranian negotiations in February were marked by potential misunderstandings on the American side that may have contributed to the President Trump's ultimate decision to attack Iran. The U.S. has a State Department and a core of seasoned diplomats, and deep technical expertise, which this administration, would be well advised to take advantage of.
Yeah, they would. All right, so how do we get out of this?
Well, when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. Okay, so it's very hard to see how the president salvages a win. He is looking for some sort of victory narrative. How plausible that will be remains another story. But it is absolutely true that it's difficult to see what can be gained from renewed bombing of Iran. Make matters worse. So I think that the way out of this is going to be returned to something that looks like the previous memorandum of understanding with Iran, and that may entail accepting as an interim measure some degree of Iranian or joint Iranian-Omanian administration, management of traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. That would be a bitter pill to swallow and difficult to, or impossible perhaps, to reconcile with freedom of navigation on the seas and the law of the sea. But that is far preferable to a resumption of bombing of Iran, resumption of Iran striking out at Gulf states. And so the return to war should be avoided, and finding some off ramp, which I think is going to, again, look like something like the previous MOU. I think that's going to be the route out of this. Yeah. That will likely kick down the road any negotiations on Iran's nuclear program, and it will also, kick down the road what the sort of ultimate status of the strait for another day.
Yeah, and it has implications for the whole world, because freedom of the seas is not a concept that's unique to the Straits of Hormuz. I'm thinking the South China Sea comes to mind immediately, but there are other places. I mean, it's a lot of the benefits that America has enjoyed for 60 years have been put at risk by this misadventure.
Absolutely. No, it would create an unfortunate, potentially dangerous precedent. But again, that may be the least worst option available now.
Yeah, right? I agree. When you lose, you lose. Okay, let's change the subject a little bit in the little time we have left. What's your expertise tell you about the continued destruction of fishing boats in both the Pacific and the Caribbean?
Well, I mean, I think this appears from the available reporting to be performative killing for the amusement of certain figures in the administration. Okay, this is not a serious counter-drug effort. In the initial stages when it was taking place in the Caribbean off the coast of Venezuela, it also served as a part of the pressure campaign against Maduro. But this is killing for killing's sake.
I'm sorry. That you can't. I am not so jaded by Donald Trump that I can hear that and not have my breath taken away.
I mean, the reporting by Maggie Haberman is that these videos are circulating within the administration. They're referred to privately as Hegseth's snuff films. The president likes military spectacle. That's why they were posting these videos online when they started doing these strikes last September. And so I think it's a particularly gruesome form of the military spectacles that this administration favors.
How can there be accountability for this? I mean, what you are describing is just plain murder. How is there going to be accountability?
Well, the next Congress, if the Democrats get control of one house, the Armed Services Committee is going to have to dig into the boat bombing scheme, its origins, who signed off on it, who objected to it, if anyone inside the administration or inside the Pentagon, and then who participated in it. Okay, that needs to be brought out in the light. Okay, and that needs to set the stage for potential accountability under a new administration. Okay, yeah. And that accountability can range from criminal prosecution to administrative action or potential employment action against military officers involved in it.
Yeah, terrible, absolutely terrible. And you point out there is no conceivable way the current Justice Department would hold anybody accountable for a crime in this man's name. Okay, that's terrible. How about Pete Hegseth's so-called counter-cartel coalition that he's announcing? I don't know where we have the extra military personnel or equipment, but he's now talking about using a full-blown military attacks in Latin America.
So both the boat bombing scheme and this counter-cartel coalition, I think, need to be understood in the context of this, the administration's trying to framing of doing the war on terror against the narcos in Latin America. And again, as with the boat bombing scheme, much of this is performative, right? It's about the theater of counterterrorism, the theater of lethal strikes. How the counter-cartel coalition will manifest itself militarily in terms of U.S. action remains to be seen. It seems likely, though, that it will include more U.S. strikes on land. We've already seen a couple of strikes, one in Ecuador and one in Venezuela against alleged narco targets. And so we may see more of those potentially in Colombia, and then also potentially in Central America with Guatemala, Honduras having been mentioned in recent reporting. There could be a range of U.S. involvement in any joint operations with local militaries, everything ranging from intelligence sharing to actual airstrikes or even potential U.S. boots on the ground. Obviously, Congress has not authorized any of this, and so again, this is another potential military misadventure that the U.S. Congress should be pushing back against and potentially again imposing funding restrictions on.
Yes,
unless the administration comes to Congress and seeks authorization for this.
Yeah, I mean, they won't. I mean, the DEA has been involved in information and intelligence sharing with countries for decades. And again, as you mentioned with Iran, there are other strategies than just blowing things up that may be more effective.
Absolutely. The U.S., of course, has a long history of military cooperation, military intervention in Latin America, with Colombia specifically. Of course, there was Plan Colombia from the Clinton administration onwards. And so cooperation or joint operations could take multiple forms. But this administration, again, has shown a penchant for wanting spectacle. They want the airstrikes, right? Whether or not they make any sort of sense in terms of a strategy or broader U.S. foreign policy, they want the content.
Yeah, great. So this is just morally reprehensible. But on the topic of content, so they want to show the great force the United States has to blow things up. And yet what we've seen this week is the president hiding in a catering container to be shipped, away in secret while he uses reporters and members of his cabinet as decoys in where there was a credible threat. I don't imagine that's a happy image for them if that's all they care about is image.
No, and I think it may go to why the administration responded so aggressively to the initial reporting about the plane switcheroo in Turkey. Why they sought, I think they subpoenaed the phone records.
Their houses went,
went to the houses of some of the journalists because the facts are embarrassing. But I think it's also worth taking a step back and noting that it is plausible that Iran would seek to retaliate specifically against President Trump. They did so after the 2020 killing of General Qasem Soleimani
Mhm.
under Trump's first administration. There were, DOJ has indicted people for conspiring to attack President Trump. So it's the notion that they would again seek to attack him after due to the U.S. war in Iran and the killing of Iran's supreme leader is not completely far fetched.
Oh, I agree with that. Absolutely, I agree with that. When again, you go to war without thinking about it, you should expect you go to war even if you think about it. You should expect the other guys to go to war back. But it doesn't mean you get moved in a catering container, and it doesn't mean you take journalists and your own cabinet and you make them decoys. There are other options, but this is not you saying this, morally reprehensible administration, and cowardly and kills people for a spectacle, as you've pointed out. You can't expect much else. Hey, your expertise, not being partisan like me, is fabulous and helpful for us to understand this. And, I don't pretend to be a journalist. I'm not. I have a point of view that I share with people, but I hope it's grounded in facts, and talking to you helps that a lot. So I really appreciate your time and your expertise that you bring to these enormously important issues of life and death and the future of the relationships between countries.
Well, no, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much for having me on.
We'll do it again.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. The good thing about Friends is they come back, and happily Jill Lawrence has come back. She is a columnist and author. Her work, I think most frequently you now find it in the Bulwark, but you can find it everywhere. We'll talk about that, Jill, in a minute. And she, wrote a book reporting on the ways Washington actually got things done, but that was then. Jill, where is your work most these days? Am I right?
Well, it's sometimes at the Bulwark. Next week it'll be in the LA Times. This week it's been on my Substack. Before that it was on Contrarian. I have a point of view, and some people appreciate it all the time, and some people appreciate it a few times a year. So it really just depends. But I have a lot of outlets, so I don't have a lot of time because we're in crunch time on the DC Voting Rights Cookbook, and it has to get finalized. The publisher is, hot on the trail of getting it done in time for next year. So that's
Just
very
remind
exciting.
everybody, you've written this cookbook, and it is to fund the DC voting rights campaign?
No, it's to publicize the fact that DC doesn't have voting rights. And the working title is with recipes and justice for all, and it will have recipes in it at all levels, and it will have little chunks of history and food history and political history, to say, how the hell is it that 250 years after everything all started with taxation without representation and tea dumped over the ship side, we still don't have the vote?
Yeah,
We
DC
don't have
without
any
votes is like a
representation.
chocolate chip cookie with no chocolate.
No cookie either.
Well, all right. So it's coming out. You're in crunch time, and it'll be out next year.
Next year, yeah, hopefully. September, hopefully, by the time all the presidential candidates are campaigning for, the early primaries.
Yep. Oh, well, let's turn to that. Well, it's still summer. Do you like vacations by beaches?
Do.
Okay. Are you excited about America's newest territory, the Strait of Hormuz, where you can stay in a Trump hotel and put your feet in
Not
the water?
those beaches, Edwin.
Well, what do you think of a president just announcing that waterway is now American territory?
Didn't he say he might or he will?
Yes,
Has he?
like Greenland. Yes.
Well, as Jamie Raskin says, at least statehood's on the table for some places, not DC, but Greenland and, Cuba, maybe the Strait of Hormuz. I don't know. Things are so overwhelming, as I kind of take it that you agree, since you said you wanted to talk about everything. It's so overwhelming just to think about the war, because every single part of it has screwed up everything. You read all these very deep analyses of our relationships with the Gulf states, and they're having second thoughts, and they made a bad bargain when they decided to deal with a transactional guy, because yeah, he's transactional for a while, and then he stops needing you or wanting you, or he needs to get elected, or he needs his Congress to get reelected, and he's not your friend anymore. And not only that, he's provoked the people who are bombing you. It's now, who could have foreseen this? I mean, a lot of us.
Everybody, yeah. I mean, I remember, I'm reminded, a US attorney who was, it had just finished an episode of indicting Chicago aldermen back in the day. Was upset with me because I got a bill passed that he was trying to bribe aldermen to vote against in order to catch them taking bribes. And he said the problem with the Chicago aldermen is you don't stay bought. And I think about that with Trump. They think they got him and it doesn't work.
It never works. I really, that book you were talking about that I wrote was about when things got done because negotiators trusted each other and could actually do it. And there are some examples of that happening even now. But one of the better ones was Elizabeth Warren and Republicans working on a housing bill, and Trump was so ticked off that they did something constructive for actual people, and it was bipartisan, that he didn't veto it. He probably knew he couldn't sustain it, but he just didn't sign it, so it became law without his signature. Whereas he signs all these things with big ceremonies that are going to get lots of people in trouble on the campaign trail this fall. I'm thinking of the One Big Beautiful Bill mainly, with all the cuts that have gone into effect and will be going into effect for programs that people really need, or making them more expensive, healthcare mainly, and food. But I mean, who needs those, right?
Well, and let's remind people that the biggest cuts to healthcare in that bill don't take effect until after the midterms. So they want to make sure we don't remember that. So every chance I get, I want to remind you that the cuts that they passed into law take effect right after the midterms.
Right. And it's a very deliberate misreading of what happens when you make the kinds of cuts they've made. They're not cutting programs, they're just adding paperwork and burdens and work requirements, and mostly work reporting requirements, because actual work is being done by most people, or they're doing caregiving, or they're in school, or people have very complicated work situations, especially in a gig economy. So, it's just going to throw a lot of people off who can't seem to figure out how many hours they worked, in each segment of a year or a month or a week, and how that, whether they qualify or not. And, there's just been so much research on this stuff where you hear about, people who have had incredible trouble becoming certified as medically frail, or people who are couch surfing and the mail never catches up with them. People who this year, I think we just heard about somebody with cancer who can't get certified as medically frail. They think that this person might be able to work sometimes and they need to work. So
Right, and
that
even if
way,
you, yeah, that's it. I
so
mean,
you won't get
people,
the health care you need
what
to
Jill's
work.
talking about is this, you must work in order to get government benefits, stuff that the Republicans have put in. So imagine your life. You work part-time in a grocery store, you work part-time as an Uber driver, you work part-time catering, right? You have to be able to report like what are the hours you worked in which places all the time, and then you have to get proof of that and you have to submit it to the government. And you know what, like your work schedule might be the same, not be the same one week to the next, right? So the
One
paperwork,
day.
right, one
Yeah.
day to the next, the paperwork requirements are onerous and impossible to fulfill, so they can throw you off. This is the same government that this week said companies don't have to tell us who their owners are, right? So they can launder money through them. But if you're
Right.
just a poor person trying to, get through the day and get the benefits that your government is meant to give you, you're out of luck.
I mean, this only applies to some people and not to others, as you've pointed out. I remember doing something on this years ago, and the agriculture subsidies were just I mean, it would be funny if it wasn't so awful, because people who are farmers are often not really farmers. They're accountants who own part of the family farm or something like that. Just other people don't have to prove where they were every hour of every day and get
Mhm.
certification that they worked. So it's a double standard. And also, there's huge consensus in the country right now that the government should be responsible for making sure everyone has health insurance and access to care. And the secondary effects, which are really actually primary effects, are that hospitals will close, because this is where they get paid. And if they're not reimbursed, then that has a ripple effect, not just on them, but on the communities and the healthcare industry, and the place where the nurses and doctors go for lunch. I mean, I just do not understand the policies of this administration. They go against common sense and common decency all the time.
Yes, but you do understand it because
Well,
Occam's razor here, Jill. The most easy way to explanation is greed, is grift and greed. Mm.
yes, yes. I've had some unfortunate experience in the last few weeks. Trying to get the documents one would need to get under the SAVE Act if it passed, this prove your citizenship every time you move or change your name. I don't think most people realized, and I didn't even realize until, a couple of weeks ago, that you would have to have your documents. It's like a show me your papers law every time you change your name, which my mother did 3 times. Uh, and every time you move, which she in fact did 8 times over the course of a
Why
very
are you
long
doing
life.
this? Is this an experiment or is there a real
No,
cause?
there was real, I won't get into it, but
Okay,
you do need these documents for
for
a lot of
things.
things. And I had never really had to delve into it. I mean, my father changed our family name when I was little, and so I had 2 names before I even started, even knew. But I haven't changed my name at all, and that's very helpful. Just a warning out there in case anything like this ever does get past women out there. Do not change your names if you don't want to go through hell when you want to vote or whatever, or make sure you have your papers, your birth certificate that's changed, and your marriage certificate from, I mean, I was looking for documents that were like 100 years old,
Ugh,
practically a century old.
ugh. Yeah, well, this is the world they want to put us through. Um, Full stop. It's not worth time how terrible they are, much more. So let's talk about the primaries. What did you think of this? I mean, we're almost done with them. What do you think about the primary season?
Well, I'm sighing a lot of relief sighs over what's happened in Maine and also what's happened in Wisconsin. Um, the piece I have coming out next week is kind of about the big tent and let a thousand flowers bloom type thing. And I think that's really the way Democrats have been and should be. And that doesn't mean they should keep trashing each other. They should just stop it. Because, and I'm a broken record on this stuff all the way, back to last year when I noticed that there were 4 candidates running on affordability in completely different places in completely different ways. And good for them because they all fit where they were running.
Mhm.
And there's some very interesting research actually by G. Elliott Morris about the damage you can do with message discipline. I mean, you really would not want Tom Suozzi, who is the conservative to moderate, self-proclaimed capitalist that represents where I grew up. To be running in New York City where a democratic socialist won. I
Right,
mean, with that message.
right,
So,
right.
I mean, it's, and fine, Swazi's fine. I'm sure my parents voted for him. Everybody votes for him. He's the Democrat. And, they want a Democrat. They're smart enough to know they don't have to agree with everything he says. And that's how all Democrats should be. Am I right? So, I mean, the thing that was going on in Wisconsin was more than somebody out of step. Francesca Hahn was an inept candidate. She kind of didn't realize or didn't know how to talk about Thanksgiving, which should be the easiest thing in the world. I mean, if you can't realize that people are not going to like you talking about the downside of Thanksgiving, um, you know,
Well, the good people of Wisconsin made a good choice, and that won't be an easy election, but there ever is an easy election in Wisconsin. Um, but that doesn't, I mean, you didn't see the same kind of mistakes with Dr. El-Sayed in Michigan. He
Yeah,
ran a disciplined campaign,
yeah,
and he was a
yeah,
solid candidate.
yeah. I mean, Haley Stevens kind of fit the profile theoretically, but she's not a great politician.
Well, how do you
I mean,
mean? Politician or
how do I mean?
campaigner?
Well, I mean, she's a competent politician, but she's not charismatic. And, I mean, I didn't hear her talk about one of the best things I thought she did. I mean, maybe I just missed it, but she introduced an early impeachment resolution against Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It was one article of impeachment, but it had 28 counts to it.
Hmm.
And she covered the waterfront, and it was stupendous.
Yep.
It was a really good thing to do. And I know people don't want to talk about, impeachment, but at least for the cabinet, this is how I think Susan Collins could go down. All you need to do is do an ad a week about each cabinet member she voted for. Um, I
And a
think the only one
Supreme
she,
Court justice. And
oh
a Supreme
yes,
Court. I
oh,
will protect the
absolutely.
people of Maine. I will protect the right to choose for the people of Maine, except when I get to vote on it. Like, yeah.
Well, and as an enabler of Donald Trump, she kind of, I'm not going to say she has no equal, but she has no equal in sort of equivocating and then accommodating, except for maybe Bill Cassidy. He's been astonishing, especially as a doctor.
A profile in limp spaghetti.
I don't know how he can live with him. I just don't know why people think their jobs are so important.
I
You know
agree.
what I mean?
Particularly people are willing to send young men and women to die for an idea of democracy they don't believe in.
Well, yeah, yeah.
I mean,
I just,
let's change subjects for a minute. We'll come back to this. But like, what is your gut reaction when you read the stories of the misery on the USS Abraham Lincoln?
well, it's not the same as Trump's gut reaction which was they haven't been deployed long enough.
Right.
I mean, some like Charlie Sykes put up a picture of the food they were being served. I mean, the whole thing is a nightmare, and it's clear that he's never been in the military, and obviously we know that he can't put himself in anyone else's shoes. He doesn't know how anyone else feels because he doesn't care, and he's missing that part of his personality. But this other thing that's come out about trying to bring the Navy back to, the World War II days and spend billions of dollars making it so that they can't use the most modern way of getting airplanes off these destroyers. I mean, it's really crazy. I mean, it's not crazy in the context of, gutting renewable energy and bringing us back in all ways, but
Well,
we
take your
need,
time. You're going too fast for people. So the thing you're
I'm
talking about
sorry.
now, right? Donald Trump is ordering or threatening to order the Navy to retrofit ships to use old technology, right? We have used these electromagnetic catapults to shoot jet fighters off aircraft carriers. And he's like, no, I want steam ones. And he's saying we need to redesign the entire Ford class of aircraft carriers because I don't like the way the tower looks. And that means they have to redesign the whole things, right? He might as well be saying to the US military, by order of the commander in chief, you will all use bayonets when you go into battle. And that's going to be our technology. This is a man who says, this is a man who crows about the lethality of our army and has undermined it left and right and lost to a third-rate power in Iran. This is the most mismanaged, most disgracefully managed military of my lifetime. And I lived through Vietnam, parts of it, most of it. But this is the
Yeah.
most disgracefully managed military ever. And Pete Hegseth should be, I mean, whatever they think they're doing to Dr. Fauci, it's going to come back to Pete Hegseth, and there will be receipts.
Well, one hopes.
Forgive me, Jim.
No, I completely understand. I mean, we all go off on these rants because it's so, it's hard to get your arms around this stuff. And I mean, there was actually buried deep in a Wall Street Journal story, there was a quote from Mark Kelly, the astronaut and pilot, who's, and he was basically saying, I can do this, this, and this, and I've flown X many planes off of ships and blah, 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 blah. And even I wouldn't tell them how to, what to order and how to do their technology. And it was
Mhm.
so low key and made so much sense that I mean, he's not a very showy guy, but he's solid, really solid. And the contrast with Trump is something else. So anyway, that's my feeling about that. And you know speaking, he's, I know I'm skipping around here, but he's on the list, the 2028 list. So
Mhm.
it was an interesting way of seeing him in that context.
He's certainly
The
calm,
Oh
under
yeah,
fire. Yeah. So,
yeah.
so, so, Jill, in the primaries, I mean, you've talked about how important it is for candidates to be authentic, right? Voters can tell when they're not themselves. I think Dems have done a pretty good job about that this primary season. I think they have not listened to their campaign consultants who've told them to be, whatever they told them to be, and they've been themselves. The ones who've been themselves have done better, right? I don't know how Republicans can be authentic come the next round because um, I take it back. I don't know how Republicans who don't fully embrace Donald Trump can be authentic. And this is going to be a problem for the Republican candidate in Michigan who would like to create some space between himself and Donald Trump to win a general election there. But I don't know how he can do it. For one, there isn't a Democrat that's going to let a Republican have any airspace between them. And as we talked about in Maine, you vote for the guy all the time, you're going to wear the jacket. But even if they try, the Republican base won't let them. If they take any space to be anything other than Donald Trump's agents, not authentically themselves, but his agents, the Republican base is going to turn on them.
Right. So does Trump go and campaign with Mike Rogers in Michigan?
Maybe, and then doesn't remember his name on the camp when he's out there saying, "And my good friend, Joe Smith." Wait, what state is this? Mike
Right.
Henry Rogers, Mike Rogers. Yeah, right. That's what
Right.
he's going to do
I
in
know. I
hour
know.
three of his spectacle. Yeah,
Yeah, it's really a no-win situation, because then if Mike Rogers says, see, he doesn't even know me, I don't even know the guy, but then all the Trumpies stay home, and no,
right.
you
They're trapped.
cannot, yeah.
They're
I
trapped.
and I don't think that the doctor is going to come off as, see, one of the things that I've written about is how it's not like these people are running to be the boss. Well, I mean, some of them are, but the ones like Troy Jackson in Maine and Al Sayed in Michigan, they're running to be part of a legislature. And
Right.
legislatures have a way of, smushing people into compromises, and they end up working together with the strangest partners on earth. I mean,
Yes.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has a lot of Republican partners and some Republicans who really like her. Elizabeth Warren constantly, she and Josh Hawley, the right and left populists. There's people who are doing these partnerships all over, and I've seen some candidates who've been absolutely wildly nutty, like in law school at Yale. That would be Manny Rutinell in Colorado. And he even talked about how eating meat is a sacrilege and all this. And now he's running to represent ranchers. And I mean, everything he's saying is really different. And he got the nomination. And not only that, I think the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee has it, on their list of priorities to flip
Hmm.
districts. So, I mean, people grow mostly. People learn in a legislature. Now, if you're in an executive branch, I mean, Francesca Hong, if she'd been elected, she would have been dealing with a mostly Republican legislature. Who knows? But I do think that there's room for a lot of different kinds of people in a Congress.
Well, it's a big country, big diverse country, and you want a
Yes.
legislature that reflects the country. That's how our differences get worked out in a democracy through but yes, through the give and take in that Congress. But
Yeah.
Jill, when Congress worked, when we had two legitimate political parties, the job of the Democrats going to Congress was to make a deal. The job of the left of the center party and the job of the right of the center party were to make deals where they could both get their priorities straight. Starting about the time of Newt Gingrich, the Republicans said, we're not playing that game anymore. We will never make a deal with you. Making a deal with you makes us look weak. You can go jump in whatever nearest body of water is to your state. We are not doing that deal. And the Democrats continued to play let's make a deal far longer, and it hurt them badly. And I think we're seeing in this primary a transition where Democratic voters both want a generational transition, but they also want not left, right, but the era of let's make a deal, forget it. We know who we're up against. This is the era of fighters.
I think that's right. I think, maybe on some policy issues where there's common interest, deals are still possible, like we saw with the housing bill.
Yeah, or
Help
immigration.
now,
Sure.
right. But one thing that really encouraged me this week was seeing an op-ed by Adam Schiff, the senator from California, who did one of the last impeachments. And it was all about Supreme Court reform and what needs to happen. And it had everything on my agenda. And I know that he is not going to let that go. I
I'm
mean,
glad to hear it.
he is just not gonna, I think we can trust him to do this in essentially in 2029 if Democrats are running the table as soon as that
Yep.
happens, and I think there's a whole bunch of people out there keeping tabs on things, and you know the court never should have gotten the way it is.
But it
That
has.
was
Oh my God, Jill, I'm looking at the clock. We've run out of time.
Oh
Um,
no.
Thank you. I'm glad we stopped on the court and the work that has to be done. Jill Lawrence, a fabulous writer. You can find her next week in the Los Angeles Times. You can find her on Substack. You can find her in the Bulwark. And pretty soon you can find her in the cookbook aisle.
Right. JillLawrence.com.
Thanks, Jill.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
Bye.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
Okay, everybody. I'm happy to be joined again by Dean Baker, founder of the Center for Economic and Policy Research, a prolific writer and author. Dean, you wear this proudly, I hope. You are this show's resident economist.
Well, I'm proud of that. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Edwin. I appreciate that.
Would you just explain to everybody? There's a term that's in the media a lot lately, and I think it's worth just spending a minute and telling people what it is, and that is the K-shaped economy.
Yeah, so the idea is that at the high end, people, the top, 1%, 5%, we could decide where to cut that off. But you have people primarily get their income from owning stock or other capital assets, and they're doing very well. They're spending a lot of money. Their income's rising. Stock market's up. Trump's been touting that. So they're doing very well. Most people, of course, get their money from wages, and they're not doing well. So wages had roughly been keeping pace with inflation last year into this year. Lately, they've been falling behind, and it's made it much harder for people to get by. So we see this again and again in polls. We see this in people's consumption behavior. People are feeling really stretched, and for most people, it's not a good economy.
Yeah. So just for those of you who are wondering, that K, there's a line on the left, then there's one line that goes up and another line that heads down. That's what this is about. If you own, you're doing okay. But if you work and you're getting paid, your well-being depends on your paycheck, it's getting worse. And Dean, you said this, but didn't dwell on it. So what's the relationship now between wages and inflation?
Yeah, so wages had been roughly keeping pace with inflation through last year. But this year, particularly as the war started, wages have been falling behind inflation. And what's really striking here is that wage growth is actually slowing. So there's two points here. One is how rapidly are wages going up? So if you're making
Right.
25 an hour, are you making 25.50? So that's one question. How rapidly are they going up? Secondly, is that keeping pace with prices? And inflation has accelerated, again, primarily the war. The tariffs also contribute. There might be other factors, but that's a big thing. And so inflation is rising more rapidly, and wage growth has actually slowed. So wage growth is now about 3.2%. Inflation's about 3.5%. And what's really striking, I don't want to get too technical, but if we look at just, say, the last 6 months, the last 3 months compared to the prior 3 months, wage growth was just 2.5%. So wages are not keeping pace with prices. People are falling behind. So a year ago, people already said they felt stretched. Again, we could see evidence of that in their behavior. But things are worse today by most measures than was true, say, a year ago.
I think the inflation jolt is as big as it was in COVID. I don't know the numbers, but like once again, I'm stunned by like the cost of cereal in a grocery store. It just seems like who's going to pay $9 for a box of grape nuts?
Well, I get the cheap stuff, but no, I know what you mean. And prices have been rising rapidly. I mean, most evidently gas. Everyone buys gas, at least if they have a car, you buy gas, and that's very visible. And gas prices had been around $3, a little under before the war started, and now we're over $4. And there's a lot of concern it'll go much higher. Again, I've tried to follow the oil markets. There's a lot of ins and out there. They get pretty tricky, so I'm not going to claim great expertise. But there are a lot of people who do follow it much more closely, who do have great expertise, and they say we run a risk if we don't get the oil flowing soon that we could be over $4.50, even over $5 a gallon, and that's going to be a huge hit to people.
Huge hit to the whole economy, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's most immediately, obviously, people are paying it in their gas, but what they have to spend on other things, what they have to spend at the grocery store or going out for a meal or something. Yeah, no, it's a huge hit.
And this potential oil shock, this potential energy price shock, comes at the same time we have data centers gobbling up energy at home without any commensurate increase in production and in transmission capacity.
Yeah, the data center story, it's like if you want to try to textbook of stupidity, we're really doing everything the worst possible way here. So if you compare us to China, they've been building up their electricity capacity like crazy, and primarily clean energy. I know Donald Trump doesn't like it, but in the real world, it turns out that wind and solar energy are the cheapest way to produce energy. So it's fine. He doesn't like it. He's welcome to like or not like whatever he wants. But by pushing us to have more fossil fuels, they're making it more expensive. But furthermore, there were efforts under Biden to improve the grid because we have a big problem. Even if you produce the energy, you have to get it to the data center or wherever. You have to get it to the city where people need it. That requires a grid. So Biden trying to update the grid. Now Trump wants to sabotage everything Biden did. So he's canceled some of his projects to modernize the grid. So we're looking at a situation where they're trying to bring these these data centers online. They don't have the electricity for it. That's going to lead to huge surge in electricity prices. So naturally, a lot of people are opposed to the data centers and blocking them in a lot of places. But it really is crazy. And if we're trying to compete with China on AI, we're losing that battle badly. And the big part of that story is we don't have the electricity because Donald Trump doesn't like clean energy.
Let's stick with AI, but change our focus a little bit. The private capital in the US has made an enormous bet on AI. And that, so enormous that they're not investing in other things. And I wonder, I don't know of a time when so much private capital went to one idea in our country. Maybe the transcontinental railroads, I just don't know. Is there precedent for this?
Yeah, perhaps the transcontinental railroads. I mean, we don't have that reliable data what gets counted.
Yeah.
Because keep in mind, if you go back to the 19th century, most of the country was agriculture. So,
Right.
so we're to say what was going into what we might think is in industry of some type or another, then the transcontinental railroads probably were a bigger thing. People have made that comparison, and it might be an apt comparison. Again, we'll see where AI ends up. But one of the big differences between the transcontinental railroads and the data centers that we're building today is once you laid the track, your big investment was done. Obviously, you had to maintain it. You had to get your locomotives that had to be built or rebuilt, repaired and renovated and replaced periodically. But your big expenditure was a one-time expenditure that we probably still have those tracks. I mean, the tracks have been redone, of course, but I mean, we still, we're operating the same lines. Data centers, the main cost, the largest single cost in data centers are the chips themselves. Those wear out in 1 to 2 years. So when you hear that we might be spending $1 trillion next year, those are estimates. Again, this is next year. The estimates could be wrong, but that's what people are projecting based on what the companies themselves say they're going to spend. That Amazon and Google and the others say they're going to spend. So I assume that's a ballpark number. Again, things could change. Well, they're going to have to spend something like that again. Well, about half that much again, just to maintain the same level in 228. And 229. So this is not a one-time expenditure. This is ongoing, and it's enormous.
I did not know that. That's really kind of frightening. And to go back to that other example, when they built the railroads, ordinary Americans understood what they were getting. Oh my gosh, I'm farming in Kansas. I can get my grain to markets on the coast. Oh my gosh, I have a catalog company in Chicago. Maybe I'm called Sears. I can now sell things to everybody who needs goods as the country grows. Right? We understood what we were getting with the railroads. I don't think the people who are behind AI have bothered to tell Americans what we're getting from the technology.
No, there's been a lot of hand waving. Oh, it's going to be incredible. It's going to do this. It's going to do that. And I'm sure there will be benefits to AI. It's inconceivable there won't be. I've played with it some. I assume most people probably play with it a little bit. Is it going to be totally transformative? Maybe. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that means. So it's not clear what the benefits will be, and there's massive expenditure. And again, a lot of this reminds me of what we saw with the housing bubble, and before that, the tech bubble, where you had people just going around, oh, it's a whole new world. And one of the things, I don't want to get too technical on this, and part of it, I don't know the details myself, but one of the issues with AI is the financing of the data centers. So the data centers, you have companies like Google, like Amazon, like Meta that they're building them, but to a large extent they don't do it directly. They create other companies, CoreWeave. There's a whole set of them that actually are the ones that build them, and it's the sort of thing like, why are you creating separate companies? And what I really worry about is that this is a way of, in effect, hiding debt, so that it's not that clear how much debt Google and Amazon have. Now, these are very profitable companies, so just to be clear, I'm not saying they're about to go bankrupt. But on the other hand, if you're spending hundreds of billions a year on investment, they actually are borrowing now. So these are companies Google didn't have to borrow if you go back 2 years ago. I mean, they might have occasionally borrowed for one thing or another, but they had plenty of money, so they weren't borrowing just to cover their investment. They are now. And what I worry is that we're going to get in a situation where some of this isn't going to pay off. And this isn't just me. Just say this isn't me being kind of Dean Baker, flaky, lefty, whatever. You see this in the bond markets. So they're having a hard time selling their bonds. Oracle, which is again in building up data centers, their bonds are selling it just over junk. So these are companies had been tremendously profitable. Again, I don't mean to say Alphabet's about to be that way with Google or Amazon, but they could be a year or two down if you keep spending at the rate they're doing, and they don't have the revenue to back that up. And there's a real risk of that.
And does it drive up the cost of money for everybody?
That's a very good question, and it almost certainly does. The question is how much. because there's other things going on. I literally just today posted a piece that looked at interest rates, long-term interest rates, that are up about 6 or 7 tenths of a % from where they were before the war. So you go, well, was
Wait,
that
hang
the
on,
war?
Dean. Let's
Well,
explain this to everybody. There's some rates that are set by the Fed, and there's some rates that are set by the market, really.
yeah.
Just talk about the difference, because that's really what you're talking about, the market set rates.
Yeah. So we hear the Fed every 6 weeks. They have their big meeting, and we'll hear. I guess the next one's next month. We'll hear talk about whether Kevin Warsh is going to push for higher rates, or Trump, of course, wants lower rates. I don't think anyone's going to go for that. But in any case, is the Fed going to raise rates? So we'll hear that. The rate they're talking about is a rate that banks pay on overnight money. So they need money just overnight to maintain their reserves. So that's a rate banks are paying to each other. And that's what the Fed is setting most directly. And that's, God, I should know what it is. I think it's 3.75%, or whatever it is. But we don't pay that. So what we care about is the longer term rate that's set in the market. That's the rate. Those are the rates that you're paying on a car loan, on mortgage interest rate, if you have a HELOC, So those are the rates that we care about. Those rates have gone up 6 to 7 tenths of a % since the war started. So was that all the war? I'm sure much of it was, probably most of it, but probably some of it was the data centers that you have. Everyone sees the data centers that are out there borrowing, the companies are out there borrowing to build data centers. That drives up interest rates, and that's a big deal. So 0.7% is simple arithmetic. If you have to pay 0.7% more on a 30-year mortgage, and that's roughly what's going up. Let's make it a $300,000 loan. That's over $2,000 a year, $2,100 a year in more interest. That makes it much harder to buy a house.
Yeah. So all of this, and then there's just the bubble risk that you were talking about, and I worry that if it bursts, it's a bigger bust than the late '90s.
I think it's likely to be. So we've had, my lifetime following the markets closely, we've had 2 big bubbles burst, and they both took a big hit to the economy. The tech bubble burst in 2001 to 2002. And the conventional view among economists, that was a short, mild recession. So there was a recession. It was relatively short. And if you just look at GDP change, it wasn't a big deal. But if you look at the labor market, we lost, I think it was around 2 million jobs in 2001. And we didn't get those back until 2005. So we went 4 full years with no job creation. That was the first time we'd done that since the Great Depression. Now, it was worse with the Great Recession, because there we didn't get back the jobs, I think, till 2016. It was like 8 years. So that was even worse. But when you get a bubble burst, it tends to be a pretty bad story. And I worry this one's going to be worse than the tech bubble, because you see, both very much the investment side, but also the consumption side. So a moment ago, we were talking about the K-shaped economy. So we have a story where most people are not seeing wage gains. They're not able to increase their consumption because they just don't have the money. On the other hand, you do have the people who have a lot of money in the market. They are spending. But if, say, the market were to fall 20, 30, 40%, not a prediction, I'm just saying that could well happen, they're not going to be spending that much.
Yeah, that's really dangerous. So, all right, into all of this, all of this speaks to me of chaotic or mismanagement of the economy by this administration. And that wouldn't surprise you, because they've mismanaged everything else, healthcare, they've mismanaged war, they mismanaged fixing a fountain. I mean, they really can't do anything right. But one of the things that matters for investors and for making investment work in any market is that the markets are free and fair and transparent. And the pervasive corruption that seems to be now part of our regulatory apparatus perverts all that. I mean, what happens to our economy when you say, I'd like to make a merger, but the way to think about that merger is, how much did I donate to the president, as opposed to whether the merger makes sense economically?
Yeah, the United States had a reputation for being kind of the gold standard in terms of being a clean, transparent market, which again is very, very far from perfect. And I'm not going to say things were great under Biden or Obama or the Bushes or because they weren't. There were plenty of instances where people had connections and they used those to get a merger through or whatever it might be. So it was very, very far from perfect. But in this case, it is blatant. Levitt, I think you saw Trump's now former press secretary, she'd say this is the most transparent administration ever. And someone commented, yes, transparently corrupt. I mean, they don't hide it. I mean, it's just clear as day. I mean, one of the things, I don't know if you caught it, but it is just sending me through the roof because it was just so incredible, was Trump is now selling special subscriptions on Truth Social, his social media site. You pay $100,000 a month, and he'll give you advance notice of his tweets that might move the market.
Right. It's absolutely correct. I saw it. Absolutely corrupt. No doubt illegal, but absolutely corrupt. I guess what I'm asking as an economist, what impact does that have if the world no longer sees America as this gold standard for transparent and free markets?
Well, we've been, this combined with the tariffs and not adhering to trade deals, we're going to be seeing, and we already are seeing it, people are going to be leaving the U.S. as an economy to invest in. If you have your choice of investing in a European country or even a lot of developing countries, probably even China, where you have some expectation of, this is the way things will be, you have some degree of certainty, that sounds like a much better deal than if you're investing in the U.S. and you could have Trump say next week, oh, I'm going to put a big tariff. You want to build a car factory in the U.S., I'm going to put a big tariff on steel. What do you think of that? Maybe you want to make me a big payoff so I don't do that. It makes it a much less desirable place to invest, and what we are already seeing some of that, and I think we're going to see a lot more.
Yeah. So, I mean, none of this bodes brilliantly for our future. So when he stands up and says, we're back, we're the strongest economy ever, we're the envy of the world, we are the place everybody wants their money to be, I've made all these deals where people are investing in America, your reaction is to...
This is just in his head. I mean, he just, it's become a joke. I mean, it is literally a joke. So he's been saying we had 17 trillion of investment coming in, and they raised it to 18, and then apparently just crossed 20. So I have friends who are betting how long it'll be till he crosses 25 trillion. It's just a totally invented number. It's like, oh, guess what? I ran 150 miles yesterday. Did I say 150? I ran 200. I mean, you could say anything, but I mean, there's literally nothing there. It's not that. But we're all used to politicians fudging, exaggerating. They're all going to do that. But, I mean, this is just made up out of thin air with nothing behind it.
Yeah, okay. Is there anything that I don't want to leave the show with just completely depressing. Is there some good news?
Well, I could give you some. People might take it different ways, but electric vehicles sales are going through the roof, but not here in China and the rest of the world. So this is really a very direct result of the war in Iran, that you're seeing exports from China just skyrocket to places like Pakistan, Indonesia. I mean, that's great from the standpoint of global warming because we need to switch to electric vehicles from internal combustion engines. But, we'd like us to be, at least one of the driver forces,
That is a very good point, though, Dean. Yeah, and it's important. The world will be okay. The world is going to have a future, but the future is not going to be invented here. And that's really the promise of Donald Trump.
Yeah, and it is just so striking, and it's so evident. I mean, it's none of this is rocket science at this point. Clearly, electric vehicles are cheaper than internal combustion vehicles. Clean energy, we were talking about a moment ago, it's cheaper than fossil fuel energy, and the prices are going down. I mean, the trends are clear. Yep. And China's at the center of that, and we're nowhere to be found.
All right. Well, that, Dean, is our last word for today. Thank you so much for the economics lesson and for all the work that you do. Tell everybody where they can find you.
They can find all our work at cepr.net. I also have a Substack, just Dean Baker. So, so I post everything both places.
All right. Thank you, Dean. Good to catch up.
Thanks a lot for having me on, Edwin. Good talking to you again.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a break and your calls when we come back.
This is a WCPT Veteran Minute. In the heart of World War II, while the skies rumble with the roar of combat, a groundbreaking squad of pilots emerged from the segregated South, the Tuskegee Airmen. An elite group of African-American pilots defied the odds with their courage and skills. Trained at the Tuskegee Army Airfields in Alabama, they became the first black aviators in the U.S. military. Despite facing racism and skepticism, they soared through the skies with unmatched precision, escorting bombers and earning a distinguished reputation for their bravery. Their red-tailed P-51 Mustangs became a symbol of excellence and resilience, and in 2007, the Tuskegee Airmen were finally honored as they were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. These aviators didn't just fight for victory in the air, they battled for equality on the ground, forever altering the landscape of the American military and inspiring generations to come. This has been a WCPT Veteran Minute.
Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid, on WCPT 820.
Okay, we are back, and Jim, you're in the driver's seat. Kick us off.
Hi, Edwin. The president announced on Truth Social that he's going to make the Strait of Hormuz an American territory. And I'm surprised he did that because he charges $100,000 for those kind of tips. But I'm sure his family will be. But they'll be the odds got to be at least 1,500 to 1 to do that. So his family's got to be piling in their dough to get that bet down. And the other thing is, how about $20 million for electric gloves? Now, they can use those electric gloves very well at the polling places. If voters are standing in line, they know that ICE or anybody else there's got electric gloves on. They might think twice before they go into the polling, before somebody grabs them by the neck and maybe shocks them into the next world. So we've got that going for us. But what's really, my God, I've been on the earth for a while, and I've never seen life it was always cheap, but now it is at bargain basement levels all over the world, and criminality is just gone berserk because the mutuals are so high, Edwin. In my day, I think of Mike Madigan sitting in jail for 7 years. I still can't understand what he stole, and these people are stealing billions of dollars. It's amazing, and nobody announces anything about it, or they don't even blink an eye. But I've never seen life has been so devalued that it's amazing to see. That's why I was happy to see his Zayad character in Michigan. He worked for the health department there. I don't know what section, pretty large section. And he said, we deserve health care from cradle to grave, like in Europe and other places. But for some reason, Americans really devalue life. I mean, we have homeless people dying by the elements. We have how many immigrants have died in these geo prisons? They're making billions of dollars and we don't know anything about. I mean, it's just astounding to watch this nonsense. And nobody seems to bat an eye. I mean, the Nixon story was the best when Vance said, well, the Nixon, that would have been a half an hour, that would have been just a blip on the screen. And he's right. He's absolutely right. Nixon never would have had to leave office for his criminality, not in this atmosphere. But Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say what I thought was interesting was the Democratic turnout in Wisconsin. I thought that was up quite a bit, and it showed some enthusiasm there. And one can only hope that enthusiasm stays, through November 4th. We find out where the hell we're at. But
I appreciate all of it, Jim. I mean, maybe we took our freedom for granted. Maybe we took the good here for granted. But now that the prospect of it all being taken away is so staring us in the face, there is a big turnout. People are uh, appalled. And I mean, the only thing about that you said, Jim, that I want to push back a little on is when you said nobody batted an eye. Nobody's doing anything about it because the crooks run the Justice Department, so they're not going to bring the indictments. But my God, they are coming. We will have accountability.
Can you imagine the subpoenas after November 4th? I mean, we got to wait till that January. But it's got to be a daily, I mean, just to expose these Epstein files and the corruption. I mean, Trump, charging $100,000 for tips on True Social. He's already, that's some kind of a conglomerate he's got, that you can buy into. It lost a lot of money. Crypto lost a lot of money. Another thing, what about AI? It seems like Republicans too don't want AI plants in their states.
Americans don't, and for good reason. I mean, it's not that AI is terrible. We don't know, but that's the point. We don't know. These billionaires have been pushing us around. They've been bothered to explain anything. They just push us around, say, "There's nothing you can do about it. This is what we're doing. This is what we're investing in. Get out of our way." And Americans are like, "Hell no."
Yeah, right. In the military, they're buying most of it up because they think that it's it's in the kill chain. You can kill people within seconds. But the truth of the matter is, it didn't work in Iran and at school, and it's not going to work. I mean, you still have to have a person on the ground trying to figure it out.
Anyway,
thanks, Edwin. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Brian, what's on your mind?
Hey, good afternoon. What concerns me is we're in this Trumpian nightmare because Democrats can't win elections. But we don't talk about that. Why is it that Democrats can't win elections? You can't gerrymander a U.S. Senate seat, so why can't a Democrat win in South Dakota or Texas or Arizona? And it seems like the Democratic Party doesn't have any unified theory on anything, and a Democrat in New York is a lot different than a Democrat in Mississippi. And we haven't really examined the political failures that have occurred since Bill Clinton that's wrecked America's working class. You had the last conversation, I forgot the guy's name, you're talking about the K-shaped economy.
Yeah.
Well, how do we get in this K-shaped economy? It turns out we've learned from neoliberalism and globalization that an average American with a middle school level of education in the worldwide globalized marketplace isn't worth very much money. And this was all predicted. It was going to be a race to the bottom. And then on top of those mistakes, the neoliberal Democrats decided, well, let's make our immigration system more open and more relaxed, and we won't enforce the laws. And we'll just let millions of people into the country, and it'll just all be great. Well, both of those assumptions have been proven wrong, or at least partially wrong. Our engagement with China, I think, has been an immense failure, another failure of Bill Clinton era. And, we need to have this confession and this come to Jesus meeting about why Democrats don't win elections. And then, so let's add this newest thing, climate change. Okay, the world is having a tremendously tough summer, let's put it that way. A lot of people are getting wrecked by the climate. And you know what? It's going to get worse. So what's that going to do to all of our other existing problems like housing and ability to make a living and the cost of food and immigration? What's that going to do to these problems? It's going to make them all worse. But the Democrats don't have any answers for this other than it seems like the brain trust, the leadership, they all want to just kind of drift back into the mode they were in the Obama era and just have this pat answer that, well, immigration is nothing but good. We have to engage in free trade. It's great for the economy.
I appreciate that. Absolutely appreciate it, and you are entitled to that view. But I've been listening to Democrats run for office this entire cycle and last year, and I hear things that are very different than that. And Democrats not only can win elections, but have, and you said it like they can't elect a senator in Arizona. But you know what? One of their senators is a Democrat, Mark Kelly from Arizona.
Right.
And you
right.
mentioned
But why
Texas.
can't they win
Texas
more?
this time. Well, I think we're going to win more this time. But Americans have had a lot of trouble Democrats have a lot of trouble in rural America, and there are a lot of reasons for that, for sure. And I think they have to address them. But climate change, that is not a problem that we blame on the Democrats. The oil industry
No, but it's
is
how we
100%.
handle it.
I think the good news is listen to the candidates this cycle. They're saying some remarkable things. They're thinking carefully about these problems. It's hard to articulate it when you don't have a presidential candidate because it's a legislature we're running for, and there are some different views, but there are some shared views. And I mean, it's a really pretty remarkable. I think you'll be happy when they're in power,
Well,
that they will address these
can I
questions
finish with this
and address them
observation?
differently than we did in the 1990s. Anyway, I really appreciate it, Brian, and thank you for participating. I'm going to keep going because I got a lot of callers. Paul, you're next.
Yes, Edwin, and right. And South Dakota, Tom Daschle was the Senate Majority Leader at one point. And the Republicans, for your previous call, the Democrats are the only party that's even come close to and actually achieved a 60-vote majority in the Senate within the last 30 years. And, of course, during the 60s, enjoyed more than 64 votes in the Senate. So, yeah, things have changed. But be that as it may. Am I right about those things?
Look, I'm sympathetic that we have work to do and that we have to do a better job of explaining where we are. But I think that's going on in the Philippines. Yep.
I agree. Okay, so I'm going to lead to Dr. El Sayed in Michigan, but let me start with Winston Churchill famously said about socialism, dismissing it sarcastically in this sort of a balanced sentence, where he said, the inherent vice of capitalism is the unequal sharing of blessings. The inherent virtue of socialism is the equal sharing of miseries. Well, he left a few things out there. So if I were to rewrite that sentence and say that the inherent vice of capitalism is the unequal sharing of both blessings and miseries, and the inherent virtue of socialism is the inherent share or the equal sharing of both blessings and miseries. And the thing about capitalism is those who have the blessings rarely share the miseries. And that's what we've come to, is the rich don't share any misery. So with that in mind, along with a collapsing federal government, which it is, it's collapsing to corruption. And in every way, I think all three branches of government are collapsing to corruption. I can't see how Mike Rogers has anything to offer Michigan, except for the fact that Michigan is one of those places that prefers to vote by racism and bigotry. Having said that, look at what happened there. Is even though Haley Stevens won Wayne County, and I'm from Wayne County, I was born in Wayne County. I was born at Old Grace Hospital on 7 Mile in Greenfield. If Haley Stevens won Wayne County, that means that Dr. El Sayed won a whole lot of Democrats in the more rural areas. And they won that because those people in those areas are suffering. And that means that the Republicans in those areas are suffering too. So Mike Rogers is just, he was the congressman in the district where my mother lived, where I lived with her when I took care of her until her death. Livingston County is a county of 210,000 people that has 1,200 black people living there. So Mike Rogers has never done anything for Livingston County or white people anywhere. And all he wants, he's the only thing the Republicans have. And I would say this, is that ask people in Michigan, ask yourself, where is Mike Rogers going to be in January when you've had a horrific storm and your power's been out for 2 days or 3 days and it's below zero and Mike Rogers is overwintering on the beach in Florida? Because he's never going to be living in Michigan because he doesn't now. You know what Mike Rogers needs? Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. I don't want to filibuster.
I just thought it was fun. Then my next caller is, I think, also from Michigan. So we'll see. Yeah, if she agrees with you.
Yeah, well, I think the Democrats, this is what I have for Mike Rogers. The Democrats need to buy Mike Rogers one of those giant 10,000-piece jigsaw puzzles that takes like 5 years to complete, so that he'll have something to do, while he's aging in place on the beach in Florida. Because I can't see, and I will meet with my Democratic friends on Zoom next Wednesday for the monthly writers meeting, and see what people have to say. But asking these questions is, how is Mike Rogers going to help anybody in Michigan when he's already locked step with Donald Trump? He's already said that tariffs are working. We're bringing in billions of dollars in our tax monies in higher costs. I don't see, and I cannot see blacks sitting this one out.
No, and also, Paul, those tariff dollars that are coming in, they're tariff refunds now because of the tariffs were illegal, and they're billions of dollars are being paid in tariff refunds to big companies, and it's not being passed through to you and me. I mean, corporate profits are up, they're way up, and everybody else is hurting. So, thank you, Paul. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, Penny, you're next. And it says Penny from Lansing, and I hope that's Lansing, Michigan, but let me know.
Lansing, Illinois.
Lansing, Illinois. Oh, you called before. I'm sorry.
Yes, I have.
Welcome back.
Oh, thank you. Is there a Republican conservative that Donald Trump will listen to?
No.
No, because was it the last couple of days I've heard that the story broke that states that voted for Kamala Harris will not get federal aid? Somebody needs to tell him that blue states have Republican voters.
Oh, he
and
knows that.
He's president of all the people, not just the ones who kiss his rear end. And then
Penny,
this
he's
morning,
never tried to be your president, the president of the whole country. He's never once reached out to people who didn't vote for him. He's never once tried to be my president or president of people who disagree with him. On the contrary, he's called us his enemies, his adversaries. He's made fun of us, and he's cut federal funding illegally that Congress appropriated for emergencies on our state, or healthcare or anything else in our states, or food for kids. All of it has been in court. We fought him on this. But the answer, I'm afraid, isn't to tell him anything. It's to throw him out of office.
and this morning I heard that high gas prices are a small price to pay for having Iran being non-nuclear. Does he buy his own gas? Does he shop for his own groceries?
No. And Penny, Iran was non-nuclear, and the Strait of Hormuz was open before he went to war. So,
That's true.
Right? Yeah.
But there's got to be a Republican with a spine somewhere, and also Democrats need to get a spine while they're at it.
Well, I agree with you on both counts, but I think in this primary we are seeing Democratic candidates win who are tougher, who want to fight, who have that spine you're talking about, and the era of let's make a deal is over. I mean, I just look at the ones who've been winning. It's been a beautiful sight.
Well, thank you for taking my call, Edwin, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you. And next time I won't confuse you with Michigan. All right, Dave, you're next.
Hey, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Conrad. We're all communists now. You know that, don't you? Donald Trump is all communist.
He has said so. Yes, he has.
Yes, and because
he's also said Greenland is part of the United States, and he's in charge of the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran has been completely defeated, and there is no problem with inflation, and that the reflecting pool was well built. I mean, whatever he said, it's ridiculous and false.
Yeah, I got a couple of questions for you. If Francesca Hong had won, do you think she would have required us to give up Thanksgiving?
No, she walked away from that a little bit towards the end. She said Thanksgiving's her favorite holiday, but she was not a great candidate for sure. But no, she would not have, and even if she wanted to, she couldn't.
Oh, yeah. Another question on the electric cars. Jim was talking about those. Do we have any electric buses in Chicago? We were supposed to get some, from what I understood, but I don't know if we have any. There's none in my area where I live here. So
I don't know. I recall seeing one once.
yeah, I thought maybe we
I
were
don't
gonna
know
get
what the electric bus fleet is in Chicago.
Yeah, because I was kind of wondering, because I've talked to bus drivers and they said they've seen some around.
Well, according to the CTA's website, which I've just pulled up while we talked, it says the CTA currently has 25 electric buses in its fleet.
Oh, that's hardly none. That's hardly none.
Right.
Because we need to get more.
Sure, I agree with that. You know, when I was a kid, we had electric trams. The electric wires were hung over the street.
Yeah, the trolleys. Remember those?
Yes, of course. And the fleet was electric. And we got,
the old trolley buses.
But lobbyists
those were a lot of
got
fun.
rid of that. Yeah.
Those were a lot of fun. I liked those.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dave. Oh, you have more? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I really liked those. We also had propane buses as well.
Yeah. I don't remember those, but I think
the propanes were pretty good.
Yep. All right, Dave, I'm gonna take a couple more callers before we're done, but thank you. Scott.
Yes. Edwin?
Hi, Scott. Yep.
Yes, there's two things. I think the Democrats need to, I'm an FDR Democrat, whatever label you want to put on that.
Good label. Wear it proudly.
Well, I do, but people don't understand it. That's what I'm trying to say about the Democratic messaging problem. And here's a good messaging relation. Out of the 340 million Americans that we have, 140 million are on Social Security. Out of that 140, 30 million are on disability. And I talk to a lot of seniors because that's what I am now. And they're having such a hard time because corporate America took the pensions away from everybody and put them in a 401k. If you want to participate, because your cheap pay doesn't even let you participate because you need every penny that you're getting from them to get by on, so you can't even put in the 5% match, correct? So here's what they need to message is we're going to give everybody on Social Security a $250 to $300 a month increase. And how we're going to cover it is take the cap off completely on Social Security, where everybody pays on every dollar income that they receive. And we could even raise that up because we don't have any more pensions, raise the 6.25% that workers pay and the companies have to match it. That's why they're against it. And raise that to maybe 8 cents means that they don't want to give a pension anymore. So that would be a big shot in the arm for the people that are suffering with no pensions. And I happen to have one, so I'm happy. But I'm looking out for the younger people. And the next thing is that what has to happen is that the Democratic Party needs to relabel their Medicare for all and call it freedom care. And what I mean by freedom care is that when you're working for a company and you want to quit and go to another company, you can't do it because that new company you're going to be employed will not insure you for 6 months. So the freedom care would insure you year round whenever you're without a job or with a job. And then you can afford to be free without a slave master to the worker that you're working for that has to keep you employed because you have to have that insurance and you can't live without it with your family. Does that make any sense?
There's been a lot of talk of changing the model from employer-based healthcare in America. It's an enormous change. I don't hold up a lot of hope that it'll happen, but there are a lot of reasons why it would be better, both for the companies and for Americans, if our healthcare system were not employer-based. Yeah, it's a very good point. And the other point you're raising, Greg, is interesting to me because it is a requirement that we talk again about how we have Social Security in a way that's meaningful, how we fund it. And all of these difficult conversations have to happen. And they will happen. And they'll,
And it's an easy
Democrats
fix.
are the ones that are going to have them because the Republicans don't. All they say is the rich are paying too much. So, all right.
Now,
Thank
I
you
got one
so
more
much,
thing, Edwin.
Okay,
Edwin,
go
one more
ahead.
thing about housing. There's 7 million people that are seeking housing in the United States. The best way and the cheapest way is for the government to put FDR people back to work, put them in the assembly lines to build modular homes, not trailers, modular homes. And there's plenty of lots that are abandoned and so forth in the states with buku property like at Shapiro in Kankakee, Illinois, with all that thousands of acres that they don't do nothing with, and you could subdivide that and put up homes for people and build a home that is economically feasible. Go back to 11 to 1,200 square foot home that is doable instead of these mansions that everybody thinks they have to have. And that's the end of my rant. Thank you very much, Edwin. I appreciate it.
Good rant. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay. Forgive me if I mispronounce your name. Kathan, is that right?
That's all good, Ed. And thanks for taking my call. You have a wonderful show, and everybody on WCPT is a wonderful cure for this Trump menagerie that's going on nowadays. But I'm gonna get to the point because I know you got more callers. Growing up for 60 years in America, mom's apple pie and doing what's necessary to make sure that everybody in the neighborhood got along. At one time, I grew up with my father in a union. I grew up watching his friends, my uncles, and everybody else was in the union. And then all of a sudden Reagan came in, and unions seem to be, especially for anybody that's not non-American, because black people wasn't in America quite there yet. We were still struggling in the 60s all the way up to the 70s when it just started to come around the corner. But I couldn't get in the union after high school. I had to either join the military or work for a construction company or go to school to further my education and go to and work during then. But those unions was not something given to Black Americans back then. So that was out of the category. And not only that, we were still living in the age where if your car was found somewhere outside of your neighborhood, you were subject to being pulled over and car searched, arrested until even if you had license and it just wasn't your car and you're in the wrong neighborhood. I remember days like that where I remember when you couldn't get a job. There was times in windows when Katrina came through and the real race war came through because they didn't want anyone Black from New Orleans coming to any one of their counties or states or anything. Bar union, bar working, bar anything. Everybody was struggling. Gas was up. People was raiding, rioting stores. Storms hit every other state. East of the Mississippi was destroyed, and everything was bad. And we still made it through that. Democrats was doing what they was doing. Americans was doing what they was doing. Republicans was doing what they was doing. But then the war on drugs came with Ronald Reagan, and that completely destroyed America's concept of what the government is supposed to do for you instead of what you're supposed to do for your country. They changed it from that to what you're supposed to do for us. Reagan came in, demolished the unions, so any hope for a Black working man, American Black working man, not the immigrants or the Haitians or anybody else. This was the Black Americans that fathers went to the military, fathers served in the Civil War, just like the Hatfield and McCoy families growing up nowadays. But they're still clinging to it as if this is our heritage and we're going to do what we want to do any which way we can. They DEI'd us, DEI'd all of Black America out of Congress. So now what's left of us? They still haven't given us health care. They still haven't given us unions. They're telling us that it's okay to be racist towards anybody else that's non-white American. That's the difference between your European American. The European Americans remember what the Klan and the white government that took over took over the Black Republic. They actually had a meeting in front of the White House, and they took over. They claimed themselves to be Republicans when the only Republicans was black people who didn't have rights. It was the
I
only
gotta
thing
stop you
working.
because we've run up against the clock. For those of you who haven't had a chance,
Thanks for letting me rant. I'm sorry I didn't have a question.
no, don't
for
go
you.
away. Don't
I was
just
just
hang on there.
surprised to be on.
Hang on there for 1 second. For those of you who are waiting, I'm not going to get to you today. Let's call back next Saturday. I think the points that you're raising are so important, in part because even today, the concerns of Black America are not being addressed in the core of our political system. And when we come out of this horrid period, when we finally overcome the anti-democratic force that has taken over our government, this white Christian nationalist bigoted force that's taken over our government, we have to make good on a long-standing promise to be a country for everyone here. Everyone here.
Yeah,
until
that's
the challenge.
Until they come to the understanding that we are all Americans once we're here contributing.
Yep.
Then everything is all
Kevin,
right. But they don't
we've hit the
that.
hour. I gotta call the day here. Thank you so much for your call.
Again, love your show, Edwin. Love everybody at WCPT.
Thank you. And thank you all for being part of it. I apologize for those that I didn't get to. Try again next time. Until then, have a great week.